City, Tacoma Park Public Works Department, they provided all the signs and the glue and the supplies that I needed. Without them, I probably wouldn't be able to do it. And also, they gave us the idea. They were already going to do this project. They basically told my scoutmaster that they were going to do this and that we can do this if we wanted. And he told me that he wanted me to do this for my Eagle Scout project. So that worked out nicely. There were 21 scouts involved, actually about 19 scouts, and then a couple other kids that weren't scouts that just wanted to help out, and then 5 adults. It's a good thing to do because
we were upstairs in closed session before we were at the reception, so we have already called the roll, and I will now go to, there are no additional agenda items, and I'll just provide a quick update on a couple upcoming meetings to let people know what's going on. A reminder that this Thursday is the 4th of July, so the city offices will be closed. Don't forget to come out to the parade and the fireworks. Next Monday, July 8th, at the moment we have 13 items scheduled for voting, followed by a work session on the Safe Grow Zone ordinance, and then a continued discussion of the grants process. Only 13. The following Monday, July 15th, we have scheduled a presentation on the community's proposal for a fenced dog park, and then a scheduled first reading on the Safe Grow Zone ordinance. The following Monday is July 22nd, and we have 2 presentations scheduled for that meeting. One from Washington Adventist Hospital about their current plans, and the other one from WMATA about the Tacoma Metro development. And that is the final meeting of the council before we go on recess for the month of August. But the following Monday, July 29th, in here, there's going to be a presentation by the Brendel Group. It's going to be a community meeting on environmental sustainability, which we might hear a little bit more about when we hear from the Committee on the Environment in their briefing to us later in this meeting. And then the council will be on recess until Tuesday, September 3rd. So that's some upcoming meeting agenda highlights. We don't have anything for the record, so at this point we will go to public comment. And that's for anybody who has anything that is not our voting items this evening, which are the special session items. But other than that, anything on our work session agenda or anything not on our agenda at all. And if you'd like to make comments, please come to the podium and give us your name and where you live. And if you can keep your comments to 3 minutes, we would appreciate it. Thanks.
Good evening. Jim DeLuigi, 7106 13th Avenue. I'd like to comment on the intersection at Sligo Creek Parkway and New Hampshire Avenue. I believe some photos have been distributed around. I continue to be concerned about the state highways work there and the safety of our neighbors. I have one photo that shows that the crosswalk, which was previously used, is still there and still marked. That photo also shows a detour sign, which is obstructed by overgrown trees. The second photo I have shows the other side of on the west side of New Hampshire, which shows the detour, but also shows that you don't have to take the detour and you can go straight to New Hampshire Avenue and go across New Hampshire Avenue, although you're supposed to take the detour. The light at New Hampshire Avenue in Sligo has been taken away, which causes significant safety concerns for pedestrians. The third photo I've distributed to you shows the sidewalk along the east side of New Hampshire Avenue, looking northward, which demonstrates overgrown shrubberies, which has been that way since the detour has been created, so the detour is really not usable by pedestrians due to the obstructions. If you have two people going, like a child on a bike, or two people with strollers or prams facing each other, there's just not enough room to utilize that sidewalk. And the fourth photo just shows it a little bit closer to the intersection of Elson. So I continue to be concerned about that, and I would hope that somebody could do something constructive. The second thing I'd like to talk about was the last meeting I was at, there was a lot of controversy and questions about the bus stop at the junction. And I'd like to encourage the city to, whenever there's a committee set up, which I was part of that committee, that maybe a core group of that committee who the entire committee would support stay intact to be able to be solicited by city staff when issues of that nature come up. I think we missed a big opportunity there, and I've seen other times when such things have happened where committee has put in a lot of work and not all the information gets passed on properly. And we don't take advantage of all the work that's been done in the past. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, just one follow-up question. If you have an electronic copy of the pictures, could you share that with me or with the rest of the council?
Yes, I can send those.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I start. So I'm Charles Dow. I'm here from Carroll Ave. I'm in Ward 3, and I wanted to make a few comments about the Safe Grow initiative as posted online. First, I want to let it be known that I live on a large parcel. I have a bunch of organic gardens. We have plum trees and pawpaw and peach and persimmon and cherry and fig and pear and grapevine. So we appreciate the need to limit chemical applications, and we do so ourselves, right? I want to say, however, I'm concerned that regarding the law such as the Safe Grow Initiative or the legislation as proposed, I oppose the adoption of the ordinance as it's written currently, and my issues are twofold. Practically, the practicality of the measure, as well as the successful reduction of pesticides. Regarding practicality, I want to quote from the city attorney's analysis, which is online, which has said the city would probably have to rely on residents to report violations. This leads to a few questions for me. How would residents report violations? How do residents know that one another is doing? If I'm applying a spray of some sort in my yard, do my residents come over and demand to know what I'm spraying in my yard so they can report it if it's a pesticide? I'm not sure that my neighbor has an inherent right to know any of this. Two, and secondly, if I'm a homeowner, if I'm a new homeowner to Tacoma Park, how would I know of such an ordinance to exist? How would I know I'm violating this ordinance? So I have some good governance concerns regarding any legislation that depends on this neighbor versus neighbor enforcement mechanism as designed. The body should seriously consider the ramifications of instituting such a policy and what this type of policy tells to other people in our community. There are other issues I have regarding determination of banned substances, granting of waivers, this kind of thing. I'll address one of those in a second. But it's also a little bit loosely worded around the $600 proposed fine, which seems quite a bit excessive, at least while it's online, as it's online now. What happens if a homeowner refuses to pay? Is there an appeals process, et cetera, et cetera? So I have a lot of questions involved with that. Secondly, I regard this as successful reduction questions and application of using the precautionary principle in this way. According to the section 14.28.040, residents will retain the ability to spray for things like ticks and mosquitoes to avoid exposure to things like Lyme disease or West Nile. My child actually had Lyme disease last summer, and it wasn't a pleasant experience, even though, again, I wouldn't choose to spray for ticks. Other people certainly have that right and could apply the precautionary principle to say, I want to risk to reduce my child's exposure to Lyme. Right? So these things are a slippery slope argument. The West Nile obviously could be used for similar logic. So both of these are good examples where I think education on the use of pesticides can promote limited or zero usage, but an outright ban like this will have no effect except make it harder to spray for these known carriers of diseases. It should also be mentioned that the people that can get through the waiver process are very likely to be our wealthiest residents and people that have the means and the time to devote to this very lengthy and established waiver process. Right? The folks that don't have the means simply won't be able to do anything. So, in reference, so that's just two things I have to say. Finally, I just want to put a note about the precautionary principle. This application and establishing this as a policy point is a slippery slope problem. Many people are concerned with various things: electromagnetic fields, microwave radiation, genetically modified organisms. Is it the future intent of our city council to limit exposure to power lines or cell phones or Wi-Fi or smart meters? So I'll stop there if you want.
Hi, I'm Jen Wofford, and I wanted to welcome the new city manager. It's really lovely to have you here. And I want to thank the mayor and the city council for their amazing support and backing of the Celebrate Tacoma Festival. And your fabulous staff in the recreation department clicked in 800 or 900 people, so that was mind-blowing. That was great. And I wanted to thank you all for supporting that and making that possible. And I wanted to speak about a couple things. One, I wanted to speak in support of the Safe Grow Initiative as a mother and as someone who was formerly pregnant. And I did have neighbors who were spraying, and they put a little sign out, and I had to keep my son off the lawn, and it made me nervous. But I do think we want to make sure that we don't create animosity between neighbors, of neighbors telling on neighbors. That's not nice. We want to build trust. So if you guys can figure out how to work it in such a way that we ban pesticides and also build trust, that sounds really good. I wanted to also talk a little bit about my interest in helping whatever efforts we collectively in Tacoma Park could do around anti-poverty issues. So we really need job creation for youth and for teens, and Licia does a beautiful job running the teen program, amazing, but we need job training, job placement, and for example, in D.C., as Mr. Kenner probably knows, that they have an amazing summer jobs program for D.C. high school students, just amazing. We don't have that. We need to do something for the kids. And then I worry a lot about low-income families around health, access to services. Even our newsletter, I don't know, so you guys can educate me, and I'm glad to collaborate with you as we go forward. But our newsletter appears to be predominantly in English, and I think there's one Spanish section on the landlord-tenant, but I don't know that it's translated sufficiently or in an Amharic and really accessible to people, and that's a good source of information now that it's our main source of information. And I also really, as a mom who is almost done paying outrageous child care expenses and heading into public school, kindergarten, here we come, TPES, very excited about that, but I don't know how people afford childcare if you don't have, a professional college degree level type job. It's impossible. It's hard enough to afford for me. I don't know how people manage to have the childcare needed in order to work. So I just want to say that I would love to work with City Council on anything around anti-poverty. Tacoma United for Engaged Community is going to get back together, figure out our next steps. Cheers thinking about next steps, but these issues are pressing, and I wanted to say thank you. Bye.
Mr. Lovelace is...
Hello, my name's Pat Lovelace, 7620 Maple Avenue, your official peace delegate. One thing I want to do is I want to tell everybody it feels great to have our city manager, and it also feels really great to have Kay Daniels Cohen back on the city council at the meeting. It makes me feel really good to hear her voice again. Yes. And we love her. Everybody say love it, love it, love it. Love it, love it. And also I want to thank Keisha Johnson. She's my weekend healthcare worker and weekend nurse's aide. She had several T-shirts made up for me to replace the other ones that were fading out. As you can see, this is a brand new T-shirt. She had it made up. And she had a cap made up for me also for the 4th of July. And also, another thing I want to bring up is a few people have been following the Supreme Court. There's been a lot of decisions come down last week. One was the same-sex marriage, which was in our favor, which I felt really good for. The ones that I did not feel good for was the affirmative action, which they seem to be trying to strike it down. And also the Voting Rights Act. They took Section 5 out of the Voting Rights Act and struck that down. And I feel really bad for that because that's the main enforcing tool of the Voting Rights Act. So states cannot encourage or promote or add discriminatory laws allowing blacks not to vote, making so they can't vote and making it so minorities cannot vote. And if you notice, they've been having these laws about the got to get a picture ID, and you got to get this, and you got to get that, and they make them wait in long lines, trying to discourage minorities from voting, and that's how the Republicans are getting in. But what we got to do is we got to get out there and register to vote. Vote like your heart depends on it, because it does. For God's sakes, this is the time we got to be active. Come out to the Martin Luther King 50th anniversary march on August 24th down in Washington, D.C. We're expecting hundreds of thousands of people down there. And also come out Friday, tomorrow night for the Starving for Justice demonstrations. I'll be down there tomorrow night. They have the 4-day fast and vigil, but I couldn't get down there because I had no transportation. But I'd like it to see if other people can get their way down there, because that would be great. We're trying to strike down the death penalty throughout the entire United States of America. And also, I want to thank everybody for what you're doing for peace. So please remember, the 4th of July is an important day in our independence. But if you want to keep our independence, we got to stand up for our independence, and that means standing up to the Supreme Court and any other court that tries to take our rights away. You got to use your rights or lose your rights. Please, for God's sakes, we got to remember that. Thank you very much. Peace, everybody. I hope to see you on the 4th of July at the parade and everything. Bye-bye. Keep the peace. Love it, love it, love it.
Anybody else?
Good evening. My name is Jerry Cowan. I reside at 149 Ritchie Avenue. I too would like to extend a warm welcome to the new city manager, and hope that you'll stay here, be as productive and prosperous as Tacoma Park itself. I don't have any complaints, so I'm not up here to do any of that. I told the council that I would come back one day and inform you of my progress. That you don't know, I was incarcerated for 32 years. I was released on March the 8th of this year. I would like to thank the residents of Ritchie Avenue for warmly opening their arms out to me and giving me an opportunity to work and do yard work and clean gutters and all that. I know that it's not a job that a lot of people would do, but any job can be done with dignity and respect. I'm thankful for that. And I'm thankful for the council for giving me the opportunity, because if I didn't have this forum to come and speak out and tell my story and let people know that I was incarcerated, they wouldn't have given me that opportunity. So I thank you as well. And Ms. Kay Daniels, it's good to see you back, and you looking good. I've seen you walking in, and I'm happy to see you back. And I'm quite sure that everyone else is too. But I just want to thank everyone for giving me that opportunity and helping me out. The struggle is not as hard as that it has been for many, because I have a good support team in Mr. Terry Siemens and Miss Joyce, who I dearly love, and my mother and my sister. So I got a good support team. And I just thank y'all very much, but I'm still looking for a job. So and I'm a hard worker, and if anybody got some work out there for me, please get in contact with your councilman in Ward 4 here. Let me know. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Tlab Wasafa, formerly in Ward 4, now currently residing in Ward 5. I was just going to attend the meeting, but Jerry inspired me. First and foremost, I welcome you. I looked at your background. I'm very impressed by your emphasis in economic development, and I look forward to engage you. Kay, it's a pleasure to see you here. It is wonderful to have you. And last but not least, Jerry is a very impressive young man. I've been talking to him, and I am with him. I'm committed to make sure that for my own sake, actually, and I'm impressed by his energy. And I just want to publicly say, Jerry, you're welcome. We're with you. Collectively, we can make it happen. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Christina Fitzpatrick. I live on Manor Circle in Ward 3, and I am here today to speak against the pesticide ban. I of course want there to be fewer pesticides used. I recognize the harm that pesticides can create. However, having read the bill and thought about it, I don't see any way that that can be enforced without the kinds of neighbor-on-neighbor thing that other speakers have referred to, or the city coming and taking samples of my property, just taking that step without my permission. I also think, though, that we in Takoma Park, I can speak for myself, use good judgment about what I apply to my yard. I have 2 young kids, and we're judicious about what we do. And so I just think it would be really unfortunate for Takoma Park to take away the judgment of the citizens. So thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Good evening. I'm Julie Taddeo, Ward 2, co-founder of Safe Grow Zone. And welcome, again, everyone has been saying this, but welcome to the new city manager. You'll be hearing more and more about this particular issue. And Kay, welcome back. So happy to see you. I just want to respond to a couple of points that were made, not just tonight, but at other public comments. Not everyone in Takoma Park is a homeowner. 55% of our residents are not homeowners. So we need to keep that in mind. This ordinance is about protecting everybody, not just people who are privileged enough to own their own home. The other thing is, when you move to a new town, you find out what the laws are. We know about the noise ordinance. We know about the tree ordinance. You find out what you can and cannot do on your property to be a good neighbor, to be a good citizen. So I'm not too sure how that argument about how will newcomers, to our town know about weed killers. Since I spoke last on June 17th, I just want to make sure that you received Casa de Maryland's statement of support. On Sunday, I emailed the council yet another study, and the Committee on the Environment also has a study attached to the report when you finally get it, about education alone versus education and enforcement. Most studies show that when you just rely on education, you get about a 10% reduction in lawn pesticide usage. With enforcement, or at least the threat of enforcement, you get a 90% reduction in pesticide use. That's what we've found in the Canadian cities that have similar bans. So enforcement really is necessary. Now, will neighbors be spying on each other? How many times have we addressed this? The ordinance has a 2-year phase-in period. People will know the law at the end of 2 years. If they are so determined to apply pesticides, then there should be some type of penalty. But it's interesting because when I was here the last time, one of the opponents of the bill mentioned people in my ward, one neighbor who signed the Say No to Safe Grow petition. And then just that very weekend, she was talking about the noise ordinance because her quiet enjoyment of her Saturday morning was being disturbed by a neighbor's generator. So we know about these ordinances, and it was within her right to call and report this because it was before 9 a.m. So we know the laws, and some neighbors will obey them and some will not. You'll also be getting a statement later this week from Montgomery County Council member Mark Elrich. He notes that a lusher, greener lawn, lovely as that might be, does not warrant dumping carcinogens, endocrine disruptors, and otherwise harmful chemicals into the environment. He joins Jamie Raskin and Heather Mazur, along with several Tacoma Park business owners, and the 400-plus signers of our petition in supporting the Safe Grow Zone ordinance. They are not supporting a partial ordinance, a partial ban that would. Some of our opponents have offered this compromise to just ban commercial applicators. That is riddled with potential legal problems, and it contradicts opponents' basic argument that pesticides pose no risk at all. So then why ban commercial applications? Whether that hose attachment is wielded by a professional landscaper or a homeowner, everybody is still equally at risk from drift, track-in, and runoff, threatening wildlife, our waters, and all of us. So just go to the EPA's own website where they say, healthy yards, healthy environment. You have to go natural, respect your neighbors, and police pollution. Thank you.
Can I ask just Julie?
Yes.
One question. I got your email that you said you sent to us
Yes.
about the study, but I was unable to open it because it required me to go into some intermediary program and sign up
Really?
from
Okay.
some sort of Outlook program, which I just didn't want to get into.
You know, it's possible I've been in Brazil, and so I've been sending all my emails from that, so
Okay.
maybe using
So,
a different
I don't know,
program.
maybe no one else-
I will resend the link tonight then.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you for letting me know.
Hi, I'm Robert Lanz. I live at 7215 Cedar Avenue. I'd like to address a couple of comments on the Safe Grow ordinance, which I oppose. There's been a lot of talk about the Canadian experience in banning pesticides. The Canadian provinces and municipalities banned the sale of pesticides, which is entirely different than banning the use of pesticides in certain applications, but not others. You're still talking about the situation where you have the ability of anybody in Tacoma Park to purchase a legal product in a hardware store anywhere, and then you're telling them they can put it here on poison ivy or bushes, or they cannot put it there on the lawn. So it isn't as simple as saying to you city council members that if we have some sort of an enforcement in the Canadian experience, you'll get compliance with this or that, because in Canada, the sale of these products is restricted, not the use. It's a completely different situation in that regard. The other thing that is of interest to me is that when you're talking about compliance with the noise ordinance is relatively simple. You hear the noise. Compliance with the tree ordinance is relatively simple. Generally, if somebody violates the tree ordinance, there's a stump that you can see that somebody did something that they should not have done. In this particular situation, you have, as the first speaker said, he's spraying something on his lawn. What is it? You're not going to know that unless you do something intrusive in order to find out. That's one of the fundamental problems with comparing the Safe Grow ordinance with a tree ordinance or a noise ordinance or something where it's relatively easy to figure out whether somebody's not complying with the noise ordinance or the tree ordinance. So those are my comments. As I said, I'm opposed to the ordinance. Last thing that I'd like to say is that with respect to the compromise about commercial pesticide applicators, I would rather see no enforcement mechanism whatsoever and an education proponent only in the ordinance, and no banning of anything. With respect to commercial applicators, they are applying different pesticides than you can get in a hardware store. They're applying a set of pesticides known as restricted pesticides. They're not the same pesticides as you can buy in a hardware store. So that's the difference. But in any case, my personal view is that you don't want to be banning anything. You want an education component, and you'll get some results there also. Thank you.
Hi, good evening. My name is Neil Cohen. I live on Columbia Avenue in Ward 3. It's my first time at a city council meeting, and thank you. It's really a pleasure to see our process at work. I'm here to speak also about the Safe Grow ordinance that many folks are speaking about. I'm here to speak in opposition to the proposed ordinance, and I sort of come to it from just a first principles perspective. which is basically asking two questions. One, is there a problem here? And two, is this the way to address it? And I kind of get stuck on the first question, which is there a problem here in Tacoma Park? And I have not personally seen a problem. I don't sort of see huge pastures of lawns as you might see in other suburban communities with large commercial applicators that the last speaker addressed. Generally, people here, in my experience, are using their discretion and their judgment to take care of their property and take care of their family in a judicious way. So if there's not a problem here, I don't know why we would be jumping to a ban. It seems a bit extreme. And secondly, is this the way to address it? Well, like the last speaker, I would propose education. Most folks, I think, want to do the right thing. Most folks, I think, want to get to a state of compliance with, not compliance with the law, but to be in, just to feel that they're doing the right thing about treating their property and their neighbors. And to do so with education, I think, will be effective. I also just want to make another point that was addressed. I'm actually, in a prior life, a former criminal prosecutor, and I've addressed many neighbor-on-neighbor disputes in court that have elevated to a criminal level. And in my experience dealing with many of these cases, no neighbor-on-neighbor situation is ever resolved in a truly good way. Things just usually degenerate until one of the neighbors moves. And once you get to bringing the law into that dispute and trying to pit the city council on one side, or the city on one side or the other of that neighborly dispute, things degenerate. It basically becomes a tool or a weapon for one side to further an agenda that may have absolutely nothing to do with the use of pesticides, but everything to do with the fact of a million other reasons they don't like their neighbor. So I would just urge the City Council to please move in an incremental manner. There's nothing necessitating the move from nothing to a ban. Why not take incremental steps and approach it from a prudent regulatory perspective? Thank you.
You got a couple of them.
Hi, I'm Catherine Tunis. Welcome, Brian. This is Tacoma Park, and I hope you enjoy it. I'm here to talk about the petition that we had to put the council passed charter change amendment on the ballot for a referendum. 500 plus signatures, all registered voters in Tacoma Park. We had about 10 or 15 people collecting signatures. Some got more, some got less. Over 500 people signed. There were a few people who were happy with what the council passed and refused to sign the petition. And I found that their refusal to even listen that other people's, that the voters should decide, troubling, because it was a sense that I got from them that I got what I want out of the council, and I don't care what other people think. To their credit, there were also supporters of the council action who said, no, we should listen to what all the voters think. We should have community support for whatever council does. The vast majority of people asked to sign the petition felt that it should go for a referendum. And if anyone wants to know what a sort of rough view of what your ward thought of whether they supported or didn't support what you did, I'll be happy to tell you that separately. Secondly, I wanted to comment on the statistics here. Now, the charter says that you must have 20% of the registered voters to force something to go to a referendum. I'm going to posit to you that that is absolutely impossible to do, that it is a curse upon the People's Republic of Tacoma Park, because it really means that the people have no voice. They cannot put something on the ballot for a referendum. To my knowledge, and I've asked around a lot, I don't think this has ever been done in Tacoma Park. I know I've heard prior council members complain that that number is impossible to get. I did a couple of quick statistics. You know, we've got about 60% of our households are renters. All the apartments and all the condo buildings are all locked. You can't go in there. And I understand from a separate council action that the council members as a whole do not think that people doing legitimate canvassing should be allowed to go into apartments and canvass the voters in those buildings. The other thing is that If you do the numbers, it's nearly impossible to get to 20%. The other thing is I purchased the voter list, and after 3 weekends of going out and talking to people at their houses, I started to notice a real pattern here. Moved, gone, moved, died, moved. And even a former council member, whenever he left the council, it was 6 years ago, he's still on the Tacoma Park voter rolls. I would estimate that 50% of the actual people on the registered voter list are not here. They're not eligible to vote. So going to 20% is not an appropriate number. I wanted to talk to you about what other places have done in terms of what is an appropriate number to put something to a referendum. California, Ohio have somewhere between 3% and 6% of the people who voted for governor in the last election. They don't even go to their voter rolls at all. It's who voted for governor in the last election. For Maryland, it's 3% of who voted for governor in the last election. And if we were to use an equivalent standard in Tacoma Park, the number of signatures that we got in this petition would be nearly 30% of the people who voted for mayor in the last election. 29.8%. You know I love math. Finally, I will say, when was the last time that over 500 people asked the council to do the same thing? And I strongly urge you to listen to those people, put this on the ballot for a referendum, or you will not have support for this charter change in this community. Thank you.
Well, congratulations. You've managed to unite Catherine Tunis and I in complete agreement. That's quite a feat. First, I want to say welcome to the new city manager. My name is Colleen Clay, and I live in Ward 2, and I used to be the Ward 2 city council member. And I want to thank Seth Grimes for bringing this issue to the public in a meaningful way in March, and for being such a good opponent for me to argue with. And I want to thank Bruce Williams for listening to people and at least delaying the second vote long enough so that the city would then have a full 8 weeks to discuss such a significant charter change. And I would like to thank Fred for voting against the charter change. And my issue is actually specific to the teenagers voting. And I would like to thank every council member who's paying attention to what I'm saying right now instead of doing something else. I totally agree with Catherine Tunis and everything that she said. I don't want to repeat it except to point out that the issues around the statistics and particularly the idea of a 20% of the voter threshold is unheard of. I also did some research. It's 3 to 10%, usually the people who voted in the last election. So I think that her feat, and I just signed the petition, I didn't help get signatures, I think her feat is really significant. And I think it speaks to really the intent of the community. For me personally, the issue with 16-year-olds voting is that I don't want you to make my child into an adult. And it's not because I'm concerned about how she'll vote in the election. It's because I don't want society to start thinking of 16-year-olds as an adult. And we never got to discuss that. And we didn't get to discuss it because it was a done deal before it came up, because we had to listen to people who were corralled from other areas, from Circle and people Fairboat got together. And we got a lot of people from places that, they just weren't Tacoma Park residents coming in. Now, I respect Seth saying he got 60 of his residents to say that they thought it was a good idea. But I went out, solicited people in Tacoma Park, including my own family, without telling them my position. And I got mostly people said they didn't think it was a very good idea. And I think, besides the fact that I'm concerned for my child, I don't want my child to be treated as an adult for sentencing reasons. I don't want my child to be treated as an adult for reasons of age of consent. I mean, there's a lot of ways in which I don't want my child to be treated as an adult, and I don't appreciate you guys changing that. But the other thing is I think you really damaged the credibility of Tacoma Park. And one of the things that I particularly found offensive was to equate the 8 weeks that we spent talking about whether or not 16-year-olds might vote once it was already a done deal with the struggle for gay marriage, with the struggle for women's suffrage, with the struggle particularly for African Americans to be able to vote. If I were African American, I would be terribly offended by the idea that 16-year-olds have somehow faced the same thing that others have faced. But personally, I'll be done in just a second. Personally, I want to say that as, you know, I came out when I was 16 in Orange County, California. I went to the Gay and Lesbian Community Services Center, and it was firebombed all the time. And my people weren't hung from trees or beaten to a pulp or things like that. But it's really offensive to me to attack the community before you even get to engage the discussion with such a high level of rhetoric that essentially shut off the voices of many people. They just disengaged. And I think that the council overall is responsible for that. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Carter Doherty. I'm on Crescent Place in Ward 1. I think I met with a few of you. I'm here to talk about the so-called Safe Grow Ordinance. Before that, I wanted to give a shout out to my parents who are visiting Tacoma Park and getting a taste of what it's like to live here. Mom, Dad, these are our people. And I'd also like to give a big shout out for the 4th of July parade. We march every year with the Tacoma Children's School, and that is by far one of the best things to do in Tacoma Park. I just want to delve into a little bit of a process here, which I think some of you are aware of, but I want to emphasize because I continue to be a bit outraged by this, which is that the advocates of the Safe Grow Ordinance still refuse to meet with us to talk about a potential compromise here. And to me, we are at heart neighbors. Neighbors talk to one another. You got an issue, you go over and you knock on the door and you try and work it out. And this, digitally speaking, with email, was what I initially tried to do very early on. I'd still very much like to do it. There's no doubt in my mind that I think that would be a productive engagement. Jamie Raskin's name was invoked in here. Jamie didn't actually endorse this version of Safe Grow. In fact, and we communicated with him subsequently, and his exact words were, I think there's room for a workable compromise here. So I would very much take that to heart. If eventually the advocates do decide to have a chat with us, Mayor Williams, I'd like to make the appeal that you change the schedule that's currently planned for the ordinance, the work session for July 8th, and then first and second reading. This is simply not enough time for two sides to get together, potentially work out a compromise, and then go through what we need to go through, to have the city attorney look at it, to see the fiscal implications, and on like that. It's only fair that we delay this schedule, which is far too fast for something that is this complex and this controversial. But Mayor, I would like to thank you as well for your efforts to try to get the two sides to come together. We hope that can still happen. There's no reason the council should take a vote on this in anything like its current form. And in case I'm not being completely clear, let me make clear, if you do take a vote on this, you're going to irritate a lot of people on one side or the other, because no chance has been given to come up with a compromise that would work for both sides. Seth mentioned in an email to one of his constituents that he might actually abstain on this because of the divisions within the ward. Seth, we can overcome that if we sit down and see what might work for either side. We have other people who can go into the details of our proposed compromise. In a nutshell, this is workable pesticide reduction versus a very unrealistic proposal that doesn't really work in the enforcement division. And by the way, waiting 2 years to implement something is not enforcement, because after the ban is in place, you still got to investigate potential violations and then actually do something about it. And as my last point here, as I see the light go on, I want to make a point. Welcome to Brian Kenner. I really do hate to haze you with the subject of pesticides. It's a bit like joining a fraternity here, but we're going to have to put you through the ringer here. And I want to emphasize to you that if this legislation passes, you are facing a new administrative task. Right now, nobody's really talking about the need to hire new people and to allocate new money to actually enforce this, but make no mistake, you will be called on to enforce this. The proponents of it have insisted that they want recourse neighbor against neighbor. That will come your way, and one way or another, if this goes into effect as drafted, you will be the one to solve that problem, to say, hey, Brian, you need to cite these people somehow. So before we jump here, I would encourage you to take a good look at the city administration aspects of this. Thank you very much.
Good evening. I'm Catherine Cummings from Ward 2 of Safe Grow Zone Initiative. And hi, Kay, and welcome, Mr. Kenner. Thank you. I don't know why there are so many chuckles and so much laughing over this. it's serious. Catherine Tunis was talking about what is 30% of the vote. We have almost 30% of the vote if you count all of our signatures and support. We've been working on this for 2 years. We've read almost everything there is to read about pesticide exposure and from prenatal exposure to exposure in childhood and beyond. If you don't trust studies that come from Harvard and NIH and the American Academy of Pediatrics and Mount Sinai, I don't know what you do trust. Julie and I started this because we were inspired about what was happening in other places. We joined with a county group that is doing this work, and we were encouraged to do it first in Tacoma Park because of its commitment to sustainability. So people wanted us to work on this here, and we wanted to work on this here because this is where we live, and it's important, and we're raising our kids here. I could go through point by point. I do want to say that we've followed the process to the letter. It's a public process. We've tried to be very honest and open, taking guidance from you all. We haven't wanted to meet privately with Mr. Doherty for what I think the council already knows are obvious reasons. We had a discussion initially, and a website was put up that was misrepresentational, and I think it was very clear that we could not meet privately as you wanted to do ethically. I just want to mention something about the precautionary principle because I think people should understand that when there's a fear that one group, if you give them an inch, they're going to take a mile. How many times have we heard that fear play out in politics? And we're talking about our kids. We're talking about pesticides that exposure to in minute amounts can trigger asthma attacks, can actually lower IQ. These aren't maybe, these are definitely. Precautionary principle is a tool that governments can use, they can opt to use. I never heard anyone say they didn't want to move to Berkeley, California because they use the precautionary principle there. Maybe that's a reason people don't want to move there, but I haven't heard that yet. I just urge you all to reread the literature and to consider what people around us are doing and what Canada has done, and the stream study that we've showed you that shows the reduced presence of these pesticides in all urban streams, 90% reduction in these pesticides. It's serious. It's very serious. And it's happening now. Every day we hear about things in our environment that are not going right. But we can take small little baby steps, even in the face of a $35 billion a year industry. It's okay. We can stand up to that industry and say, we're a small government, but we're going to make our own decisions when it comes to what our kids are exposed to, what our elderly are exposed to, what our companion animals are exposed to, what goes into our water, what goes into our bay. I grew up on the banks of the Potomac River, and there's nothing more dear to me than that's a separate watershed, but it's very dear to me, and I'd like everyone to really consider the importance of this. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Hubert Chang. I'm from Ward 1. I'm here again to voice my opposition to the Safe Grow proposal that would punish residents who use pesticides on their lawns. I'd like to begin by welcoming Mr. Kenner to Tacoma Park. You're coming to a wonderful community where we have lots of people who feel very strongly about issues on both sides. That's usually a good thing. Sometimes it gets a little dangerous, as maybe here on the Safe Grow, but it's because we care, and I think on both sides of the issue, very much about these issues. And I want to thank the many members of council who met with us over the last couple of weeks to talk about the Safe Grow proposal. It was really a pleasure pleasure for me to get to hear your voices, to see where you're at on this issue, and to talk about ways that we might reach an amicable resolution to this controversy. I think we've heard a lot of voices tonight from people who are looking for some resolution to this, who want to come to a solution that isn't punitive, that doesn't involve neighbor-on-neighbor confrontation, that actually works on education. I think that we heard that from both sides of this debate tonight. And I'd like to really see what we can do to try to further that effort. I think that we aren't that far apart. And yes, I don't think that lawn care pesticides are a really significant problem in the city that should make it a priority for the city council to be considering. But if council wants to consider this issue, let's really focus on a measure that focuses on education first, without the threat of punishment. Let's focus on a measure that trusts our neighbors, that trusts that our neighbors will do the right thing when they're armed with sufficient evidence and sufficient data. And I think we can get there. I think that we can look at what has been done in other local governments across America. And those governments across America, they've chosen to lead by example. They've adopted pesticide-free lawn care practices on public lands. So that they've shown what can be achieved without synthetic pesticides to educate their residents about what's possible without resorting to the threat of punishment. That is what happened in Greenbelt, Maryland. That's what happened in Washington, D.C. That's what happened in Durango, Colorado. That's what happened in Algonquin, Maine. That's what's happened in Cuyahoga County, Ohio. That's what's happened with the State Board of Education in Connecticut. That type of measure would be the appropriate starting point here in Tacoma Park. And if that measure proves inadequate, if education doesn't reach enough people, as Ms. Taddeo was suggesting that it might not, I think it will here in Tacoma Park. I think we're different. But I think that if it doesn't reach enough people, we can consider more intrusive measures at another time. Come back, have some more debate, educate more of our neighbors about why we need to do something greater. So far, no government that I'm aware of in America has felt that such greater intrusive measures are necessary to stop the pesticide problem that they see in their community. I don't think we have a greater problem here in Tacoma Park. If anything, I think that we are better off than in a lot of communities. We have a lot of neighbors who are going to support efforts to control pesticides through education and not through enforcement. If you want to go further than that, I think there are ideas that we can implement, that we can come to an agreement together that put education first and that put punitive measures second. And lastly, I just want to mention that Ms. Taddeo mentioned that she had sent you all a copy of a study that talks about why education doesn't yield to the positive results that enforcement does. I don't think that that study, if I'm read the same study that she's talking about, and I've read several on the subject, no study that I've read says start with punitive measures. In Toronto, they started with a public-only ban. That, to me, is the best starting point. When you read her study, it will also say that there are best practices that the city should follow when it implements pesticide control measures. One of those policies that it says that you need to have is a baseline study so that you know how many pesticides are being used, so that as your education efforts succeed and more people may stop using pesticides, you can say to people, your neighbors are stopping to use pesticides. Let's all do it together. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Eric Lichtenberg. I live on Holly Avenue in Ward 1. I'm back here tonight to talk again about Safe Grow. Welcome, Mr. Kenner. As you can tell, you've walked into a place where people have a real passion for public policy and for making the world a better place, which is certainly going to make your job a challenge. You know, the proponents of Safe Grow feel very strongly about what they're doing, and I certainly, like many of us, appreciate their concern and their passion. That's one of the kinds of things that makes Tacoma Park special in both good and sometimes frustrating ways. I share their concern about our environment and about cleaning up our environment and making it as clean and safe as we can. But concern and passion really aren't enough if we're talking about regulation. if we want to regulate, we really need to think carefully about what we're doing. If, in fact, you decide that you want to regulate, it becomes very important to think about what's safe, what's not safe, and how you're going to tell the difference. I just want to mention what seems to me a cautionary point about unintended consequences here. One of the herbicides that's generally considered as safe, shows up on a lot of minimal risk and safe lists, is something called corn gluten meal. It's organic. It's a byproduct of making corn sweetener, ethanol, things like this. If the current Safe Grow list is approved, it's going to be one of the few weed killers that's available for people to use. And it is low toxicity. The problem is, I think the Washington State entomologist said that it's a better fertilizer than it is a weed killer. And fertilizer is a problem for us. Okay. In essence, if in fact we had a lot of people using this and we used a lot of it, we would end up contributing more nitrogen to Sligo Creek and to the bay. And we would be trading, basically, we would be worsening a problem that we know we have in an attempt to reduce something that we're afraid that maybe we might have. I think it behooves us to think carefully about issues like this. I wanted to mention just quickly one thing about the precautionary principle. There are many versions of this principle. This is an idea that is extremely controversial in the environmental movement. There's a lot of disagreement about its validity and about the validity of any particular formulation. The formulation in this ordinance is one of the most broad that I've ever seen. And including it in the ordinance is really an attempt to get the city, I think, to endorse what I would consider an extreme version of this idea. That's something that you should consider very carefully before acting. Thank you.
Just quickly. Debbie Chagnot from Holly Avenue, Ward 1. And I'm just going to, this is Safe Grow. I just don't want to repeat what everybody else has said, but my concerns about this law pretty much parallel what my predecessors have said. Worried about its language, how it's going to be applied, how it will be designated, what's going to be safe, what isn't safe. And as these chemicals change throughout history, how will we keep up with this law? I'd rather see something that starts again with education, as everyone else has said. And I also question, I've lived here for 27 years, I have yet to see a ChemLawn truck or anything like that in Tacoma Park yet. That doesn't mean we haven't laid down caustic chemicals and toxins in our environment, but it's not like what I see when I travel elsewhere in the country where that's a familiar sight. Here it's an unfamiliar sight. So I think we have a body of our population that is very willing to voluntarily take initiatives from the city government as to what's safe and what isn't and abide by those. And I'd like to take that approach first. And to our colleagues, I want to say thank you. I mean, this law as it's written, I'm a professional editor and writer for the federal government, so I read thousands of pages of regulations a year. I don't like the way this law is written. I think there's just too many loopholes in the language, and I think it really needs to be tightened up if something is going to be passed. But I think there's no one here in Tacoma Park who is pro putting toxins in the environment. I have never met anybody here in Tacoma Park that would want to pollute our environment or damage our children or damage ourselves or our health. So I think you have the community on the side of something. I don't think this is the something. That's it. Thank you.
Okay, just to make sure everybody understands, next week we have on the agenda a work session discussion by the Council of Safe Grow, and if the outcome of that work session is the Council wants to take more time, then we'll take more time. If the outcome is the Council wants to vote, then we'll proceed to a vote the next week. So that will depend on the discussion next week. Thank you for all your comments. I'm assuming there's nobody else. Okay, thank you. We will go to council comments. Councilmember Daniels Cohen.
There. Okay. You all are going to have to bear with me. In these last couple of days, I've totally lost my hearing. I'm just hearing grumblings. And Tim Mayle has been so kind as to hand type out all the big points that all of you all made so I could read them. I can't tell you how gracious that is for me. I don't know what I'm going to do about this, but we'll rock and roll and see. We'll do something. Thank you all for the shout outs. My goodness. Overwhelmed. I am overwhelmed. I really, really, truly appreciate. I didn't get a chance to hear them all. Well, Tim was about a half a pace behind them. But thank you so much. I got to make some comments about the Supreme Court this past week. One of the sweet moments about being an elected council member is they often address you as the Honorable. I was sure that they had no idea how honorable I was, but I'll take it. One of the other perks is you get to make council comments, and I'm going to make some revelations that I discovered Thursday morning while I was sitting in front of my TV on the steps of the Supreme Court. DOMA was taken down, and California's Prop 8 was reinstated. I'm sure there's a correct way to say that. There's a legalese way to say all that, but it's this case speak. This is what I understand. What was really shocking to me is the little knowledge I had about being married or being not married and just living together. I had no idea. As a married person, I had no idea how many things I was privy to. They started listing the things on the TV, and all of a sudden, it's there, right in your face, and you go, holy Toledo. I had no idea. I'm a pretty well-educated person, and I pay a lot of attention to what goes on, but I had not even a clue. They kept listing, there are too many to actually mention here. Marriage equality. I knew this was an important issue. I've always been in favor of it, always given money to make it happen. But I really didn't know what it meant to other people, not to me, because I already had it. It's a privilege to live in a time where little by little I can witness the breaking of barriers, because I was in school when Brown versus Board of Education happened. And so far, there have been so many changes over since 1954. I think it was 54. It may have been 57. It's one of those 50s.
54.
Breaking barriers of prejudice and discrimination. I'm thrilled to live in times when such legislation can pass, and I'm hoping the other 37 states will take positive action. Yippity-yip, say aye. That's all I did all day long, was say yippity-yip, yippity-yip, yippity-yip. It wasn't 100%, but it was, man, it was better than nothing. So I don't think, I'm not sure everybody was really sure that that's how it was going to turn out. So with that said, had to say it. Had to admit, didn't know anything about being married, what being married meant. Well, I know a lot about it, but it's not about what I get as a married person. Welcome to Mr. Brian Kinner as the new city manager. Consider this a true adventure with lots of ups and maybe not so many downs, and a whole bunch of fun along the way. You got your ankles are in there right now. It's going to be a real fun ride, a lot of fun. Gold stars to Trish Swanson, my friend since 1946. Tacoma Elementary, Tacoma Junior High, Montgomery Blair, University of Maryland. 1946, it's a lot of years, and we weren't babies then. We were like 4 years old at the time. She took me to the Maryland Municipal League meeting, took me in her car. She helped me get the wheelchair in and out. We met people, a whole bunch of people that I decided it was men's work. There's often times when things are men's work. So I got some men to help us get the wheelchair out of the car. She helped me eat. She helped me, do everything I needed to do because I was going to carry the Tacoma Park flag come hell or high water. And that is exactly what I did. None of it was easy. That's another thing I'm learning. Being debilitated, you don't realize how you can't even put on your own sock. You have got to get a thingy to get your sock on. It's standing up. It's just, and I'm not even that debilitated. Let's take Mr. Pat back there, who's got many, many more serious problems than I do, and he still gets where he's got to go. So it is just amazing. Gold stars to Jesse Carpenter for getting our Tacoma Park flag to the Maryland Municipal League. Gold stars to Terry Siemens for handing the flag to me and then being there to pick it back up and put it where it needed to go. Believe me, it's not here tonight. It is here tonight.
Yes.
It's right here. It is not a light thing. It weighs maybe 20, 25 pounds, so it's not light. Let's see, I got a little bit more. All these gold stars are hardly enough. More gold stars for you guys. All of you all should have gotten this in the mail today. Da-da-da! Newsletter. Do not forget, this is not recycled until August the 1st. This has everything you always wanted to know about Tacoma Park but were afraid to ask. Read the lead article to find out the specifics of bike share. This is a dream of mine. This is a dream of mine. Cindy DePaula, who's out in the audience, is the first person I thought the words, she spoke the words about 4 years ago in a Recreation Committee meeting, and it's going to happen. It's going to happen, and it's thrilling. It's really thrilling. All the particulars are here. It's a real dream come true. Another dream come true is the bouquet of green beans that Brian Kenner has on his desk. Yes. Yay! Yay! Because those green beans came from a dream 4 years ago, another dream. We had lots of dreams 4 years ago. Came from a dream 4 years ago, started in a little garden by the police station. These green beans came from the larger garden at right next to the library. And they're being grown so that they can produce food, hopefully, that people can make in the commercial kitchen. I mean, it's one of those, I'm going on and on, I apologize, but it's just one of those things that makes your heart go pitter-pat. It's getting the whole community involved in something. Happy 4th of July. Parade at 10 a.m. This year I have to ride in the car, yicky, because I can't balance on my bike. Ward 3 rocks. Look for that sign, Ward 3 rocks. I'll wear it on my back. I have to make a new sign. My lovely husband didn't realize how important that sign was. Fireworks at 9:15-ish, but the festivities start at 7 at the middle school. So looking to see everybody there. It's always a really, really big day, and thank you for being so kind to me and let me go on and on there. That's it from my side of the mountain. Thank you. Oh, thank you.
Councilmember Grimes.
Thank you. So, yes, thanks are in order to everyone who came out to comment tonight. I really appreciate it, as my colleagues do as well, I'm sure. I know it makes a difference. And my welcome, too, from the podium to new City Manager Brian Kenner. I have just one announcement to make, which is, as you know, I hope WMATA has announced plans to work with developer EYA to put in what is now in a concept design 255-unit apartment building at the Tacoma Metro Station. It is a vast improvement over the last round of development, the design that was happening then. I've been working with Washington, D.C. Advisory Neighborhood Commission 4B Commissioners Faith Wheeler and Sarah Green to interface with WMATA in a timely manner to ensure that community voices are heard. We have organized a meeting, a community meeting, for the 16th of July at 7 p.m. It will be at the Washington Theological Union, which is on Laurel Street Northwest, just on the other side of Eastern Avenue from Tacoma Park, Maryland. Stan Wall, who is the WMATA director, who is in charge of real estate development, will be there. He will present the current concept plan for development there and respond to questions and so on. Muriel Bowser, who is Washington, D.C. District 4 City Council member, will be in attendance. She is not co-sponsoring the meeting. And we invite everyone to come and participate. This is not a replacement for the City Council briefing that WMATA will give on the 22nd of July. This is a chance for the community that encompasses both sides of the border, Washington, D.C. and Maryland, because that border is really just an imaginary line, to come together and try to reach some understanding of the current plans and a path forward for affecting them. So once again, I hope you will all, if interested, come out and participate in that meeting. I should mention also we have an invitation out and expect participation by EYA, the developer. Thank you.
Oh, several things. I guess I first want to start off by wishing staff a Happy New Year. I'll start over again, darn it. I will start off by saying I want to wish staff a Happy New Year, because this is the first day of the new fiscal year. That may not mean a lot to the average person, but it means an awful lot to the people that work for city government, I can tell you. I want to remind people that the something that it's already been mentioned on other occasions. With regard to the Long Branch sector plan, the County Planning Board is holding a public hearing on July 9th at 7:30 p.m. At the I'm sorry, that's not the planning board, it's the county council that's holding this hearing. If you want additional information on that, you can go to www.montgomeryplanning.org/community/Long Branch, and that's where you'll see the actual plan. And I think this is something that certainly residents in a good part of the city of Tacoma Park should be conscious of and be aware of what's going on there. It's going to have a major impact once it's adopted and changes start happening in that part of it. A good part of Long Branch is outside the boundary line of Tacoma Park, but it's an area where many of us go to shop, and I know that's where I go and get my hair cut up there every few months, whether I need it or not. I also want to ask the mayor to be able to see if it's possible to put on the city's docket before the end of before we adjourn for the August recess, the appropriate for the city council to act on the Erskine Street traffic calming project, which the neighborhood has basically concluded their community meetings are completely supportive of a plan that has been proposed by the Department of Public Works with the help of RKK engineers. That was all completed during the fiscal year that ended yesterday. The budget for this current fiscal year calls for the implementation of whatever was adopted, and so the money is there, but it needs to be approved by the City Council through the normal public hearing process. And I'd like to see if we can get that taken care of in short order. I know that I'm just speaking on behalf of the residents of Hillwood Manor in Ward 5. With regard to Mr. DeLuigi's comments on the New Hampshire Avenue crosswalk, I want to take this time here just to ask staff if they will follow up directly with SHA to get a solution immediately to the problem of the crosswalk that you've been talking about and so aptly illustrated here with these photographs. I do know that the construction process is going to soon put up Jersey barriers down the middle of New Hampshire Avenue while they tear up one half of the road. But why it's taking so long for the state to do that, I have no earthly idea. They've spent a month out there dinking around, and almost nothing has been accomplished except building one little teeny bridge and tearing up the median, which probably, well, never mind. It just shouldn't be a problem, but it is. And finally, I just wanted to say that with regard to the comments made by Catherine Tunis, the petition, I want to thank her and some other people like Elizabeth Kozel, who took, in my ward as my neighbor, for taking the time to try to circulate this petition, knowing full well that they were never going to get to the 20% level, but that it was important nevertheless to get as many signatures on the petition with regard to the charter amendments as possible, to at least present them to the City Council, which they've done. And according to the city clerk, I think 525 signatures were submitted, which if there's 11,000 registered voters, at least hypothetically there's 11,000 of them, that would be close to about 5% of the vote. That's an awful lot. Anybody who's ever circulated a petition knows that getting every signature is hard work, one at a time. It's just not easy. And I want to thank him for doing that. I happen to think and agree with 100% of what Catherine said about it. I do think that this is something, I mean, irrespective of my personal position about the charter changes, I'm not even addressing that right now. The point is that a significant charter change like this simply belongs on the ballot. I think it's appropriate for the City Council to amend the charter when we're talking about housekeeping measures, minor things that need to be gotten done that don't require participation of the city voters. But I strongly feel that something like this is something that the voters need to be able to participate in at election time. I think it would, if it's passed and it gets supported, then it'll be something that'll be a very powerful statement coming out of the city of Tacoma Park about where it stands on issues. But as it stands right now, really what it represents is 4 or 5 or 6 votes of the City Council out of 17,000 people. And I don't know where people stand on this. I haven't had a chance to go out and interview all the people. But I have a feeling that there's a lot, it would be something that people would appreciate the opportunity to participate in. So I'm hereby asking my council members to reconsider and to see if it's not something we can put back on the agenda here soon and get a referendum. That's all I can do is simply make that request. Thank you.
Councilmember Mayo.
Thank you, Mayor. I saw the Public Works Director come in, and I wanted to thank Public Works as well as the Police Department for all their work on the New Hampshire Avenue and Heather and Elm and Larch and, of course, Liger Creek Parkway and the cut-through. I know the city went through its own expense to put up signs that it really shouldn't have had to have done. I appreciate the follow-up that the city has done with SHA directly to try to get them to put in more signs. I've heard from residents along those routes that there has been some improvement in the traffic flow, that they appreciate the times when there is a police patrol out there pulling over cars, in particular cars that don't stop at stop signs. So, you know, those actions are being effective. As we know from Mr. Jim DeLuigi, there are still problems. There are still detour signs that are covered in trees, tree branches, which SHA promised us, I think, now 3 weeks ago, that they would have cleared up. So there's still a bunch of, parts of this whole detour route which are inadequately signed. I'd also just note for city staff and then for members of the public that I think all members of our state delegation have weighed in with SHA. Many of them never received a response from SHA. So I commend you for your efforts that you have, but I hope we can keep working on these issues because there's still a problem there, and in particular. The more progress we can make through the rest of the summer and then into the school year, that's when I think we'll see an uptick in the problem again. Thank you.
Councilmember Siemens.
Thank you, Mayor, and welcome, Mr. Kenner. I know many people in the community have followed with interest the work that's being done on Ritchie Avenue, and the bump outs have been put in, and the traffic circle, and the signs are down.
Yay!
And I see that Ms. Daniels can hear me now.
I can. This is exciting.
Yeah.
It's a little magic.
But anyways, the street has been repaved, and the community members have been talking about the speed bumps and have asked that we have a slight delay in the reinstallation of those speed bumps. And I asked Mr. Kenner if staff could hold off a bit more on reinstalling the speed bumps because the residents would like to see if there's maybe a compromise, some ways to implement the speed bumps in conjunction with the new traffic calming measures. I know that the community is going to be having a meeting on July 14th, and I think that depending on the outcome of that meeting, it may be necessary for the residents to come back to the city council before a decision be made. So I think we're probably talking about delaying the reinstallation for a little bit of time. Thank you.
Councilmember Smith.
Thank you. I want to let everyone know that I recently received insurance from the leadership of Washington Adventist Hospital that they will no longer use pesticides on their lawns, and there will be a forthcoming press release that states that. Thank you.
And I've just got a couple of quick comments, and then we can get to the end of council comments. A resident pointed out to me tonight that the city website has last year's schedule for the 4th of July pickup. So if the Public Works Director can just tell us quickly, if you have trash pickup usually on Thursday, is it Wednesday or Friday this week? Friday. Okay. So the newsletter is correct. I don't know about the city website, but Friday is the day. I went to a number of interesting things at the MML conference in Ocean City. Had a chance to make some requests of Greg Slater, the State Highway Administration Planning Director, who was there with the new Transportation Secretary, Jim Smith, who was formerly the County Executive in Baltimore County. Made some requests for some communication with the higher powers at SHA to make sure that we get the answers that we need on the detour that people have been talking about, on signage, on bus stops. So they promised that they would be in contact with us at the highest levels of SHA to make sure that we get our questions addressed. I went to a really interesting presentation, though rather short, by our Public Works Director on our on our composting program, and there was a lot of interest from other municipal officials about how we did that, and they want to get a lot of information. I also was reelected to the Board of Directors of MML at the business meeting, and also I was elected at the first board meeting as the board secretary, so I'm one of 5 members of the executive committee of MML, and that is the 5 people who basically run the organization day to day from a policy perspective. So I was happy with that outcome as well. Also went to the John Fahey tribute event here Friday night that was part of the We Are Tacoma series, and was glad to be joined there by the city manager, who enjoyed some of that for a while. And for those who don't know, John Fahey lived in Tacoma Park growing up and started his Tacoma record label, and is one of the more interesting musicians to have played and been a presence in music for a number of years. It was a full auditorium, and it was a great program, so I remind people to take a look at the We Are Tacoma series. And I'll give a shout out to HCD Director Sarah Daines, who made the We Are Tacoma series start and be possible, and it's a great addition to the cultural life in the city. I'll just briefly mention that I was very aware of many of the things that are associated with marriage, since I didn't have them until the decision last week, and was very happy to get them.
I thought about you.
And finally, just wanted to let people know that yesterday, my husband and I were happy with the arrival of our first great-grandson, Odin Harvey. And he weighed in at 9 pounds and 2 ounces, which is a little on the big side. And great-grandpa.
Great-grandpa.
So with that, does the city manager have any comments?
No comments, just happy to be here, and thanks.
Okay. Thank you. We will go to our presentation. If the PEPCO folks are still here and still awake. And I want to introduce Jerry Pasternak, who's the Vice President for Maryland for PEPCO Holdings. And he was gracious enough to ask me if I wanted to be part of the community advisory group to PEPCO, and I've been to a number of those meetings, and there was a great presentation that was at our last meeting, and I said, we've got to see this presentation. People need to know what's coming down the pike, and welcome.
Thank you very much. Push a button here.
You're
We're
all
good.
set.
We're all good. Mr. Mayor, council members, thank you very much for the opportunity to be here this evening and to present this slideshow on our energy savings programs. These are important programs. As you'll hear, they will enable your residents, our customers, to do a number of things, lower their energy consumption, help the environment, and save money as well. Before I call up Susan Marinelli, who's going to actually walk you through the presentation, I would like to take a moment just to thank you and express my appreciation for the partnership that we have with the city, with you, with your staff. We have an open line of communication. At the end of the day, we all share a common goal, and that's providing excellent service. You to your residents, us to our customers. And it's through this open communication and dialogue where you bring to our attention matters that need to be addressed on our end, where you help us disseminate important information that we push out to you, and you send that information out to your residents to help them. It's that ongoing communication that benefits us, benefits you, and benefits your residents, our customers. So I want to thank you for that. I want to welcome your new city manager. I think he's coming at just the right time. I look forward to having him join that communication effort and be part of the team, and look forward to working with him and to continuing to work with the city and, again, your excellent staff. So without further ado, I'm going to call Susan Marinelli up, who will present this evening. Susan is a program manager for our demand-side management for the EnergyWise Rewards program. She will take you through this great presentation, which will talk about commercial, industrial, residential programs for customers to, again, lower consumption, save money, and help the environment. And without further ado, let me ask Susan to join.
Thank you, Jerry. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Nice to see you again. Thank you for your attendance the other week. Thank you very much, council members, for having me present today. Too bad some of the residents didn't stick around, because this information I have really embodies, I think, what Tacoma Park is all about. Just for excuse me, complete disclosure, I actually used to work for the Montgomery County Department of Environmental Protection and used to present on energy efficiency programs, both from PEPCO and some of the items that we were working on at Montgomery County. So I know that you have a very engaged citizenry here, and I hope that this information can be filtered out through your communication channels to your residents, also through your e-newsletters or other communications that you have within your community. I am one of 5 program managers that actually work on these energy efficiency programs, so I'm sort of carrying the water for our entire team here, but do feel very versed to answer questions at the end. And you will notice on the presentation here that we have 2 utility logos displayed. PEPCO is a holding company, so we do have Delmarva Power is one of our utilities that serves the Eastern Shore and parts of Cecil and Hartford County. So just in case any Tacoma Park residents have family members or even second homes elsewhere in the state, they can still take advantage of many of these same programs because they are all under the umbrella of the Maryland Energy Efficiency Initiative known as Empower Maryland. So with that, I'll move right along. And so the Empower Maryland program, initiative is actually a 15% reduction in energy per capita by 2015. This is Governor Martin O'Malley spearheaded this, and through the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative and also the surcharge, there are over 160 million incentives available to Maryland residents and commercial entities to reduce energy efficiency. And so here in my breakdown, you can see that there's about $78 million available for residents and over $45 million for commercial entities. In my presentation, I did sort of take the liberty of focusing on Maryland programs, but I also have a short discussion about DC programs. I know that there's a lot of flux here in the Tacoma Park area, so I wanted to make sure that we talked about DC as well. But overarching, the Maryland residential programs cover everything in a customer's home. And so if you visit our website, pepco.com/save energy, you'll find all information, more detailed information about all of these programs. One of the best ones that I like to talk about is the lighting discounts. We've all know what those spiral CFL compact fluorescent light bulbs are. We've also started to perhaps use those light emitting diode or LED bulbs in a home. What Pepco has done is worked with retailers in our area, Strassniters, True Value Hardware, Ace, even the grocery stores, Lowe's, Home Depot, those types of places, anywhere you could think about to buy a light bulb, you can go directly into the store and already have a cash rebate on the purchase of those light bulbs. So we've bought down the cost of light bulbs to make up the difference in the premium from your just standard incandescent light bulb to the more energy efficient one. We also offer mail-in rebates if a customer is buying an Energy Star qualified appliance. You can see the values there. And so it really does help customers sort of make that decision, okay, I really want that a little more premium, a little more high energy efficient appliance because they know that they're going to get a discount in the end. And also, once that appliance gets home, Pepco will recycle the old one. We all know that it makes no good to buy a new appliance if you're just going to take the old refrigerator, put it in the garage or put it in the basement to keep cold, those couple packs of soda or beer or whatever you might have. We want to get those old appliances out of the homes, decommission them, recycle the scrap metal, get rid of the chemicals, and get them out of the grid. And we will actually pay customers to come into the home and take them out. So there's no disposal issue for those old appliances. HVAC stands for heating, ventilation, and air conditioning. And we have tons of rebates for equipment replacement and also services such as duct sealing and even tune-ups of existing equipment. Just like an automobile, you take it to the shop, you get the oil changed, you get the tires rotated. A lot of people don't think about what we have to do to maintain our HVAC systems. So we do offer tune-ups with participating contractors. A list of contractors is on our website, pepco.com, and you can get rebates on new equipment, and you can also get discounts on some of these services. The Quick Home Energy Checkup is a fantastic program for every customer that we have, every residential customer. We have energy professionals that go to people's homes and do a quick walkthrough assessment, check the ceiling around the windows and doors, see where there might be leaks, see if there's opportunities for energy efficient appliances, and make some recommendations to the customer about what they might want to do to increase the efficiency of their home. This is free of charge to the customer. There is no cost whatsoever. And then before the energy professional leaves, they install some compact fluorescent light bulbs. They'll install a low flow shower head. They'll take one of those insulating blankets and wrap it around the water heater to increase the efficiency of the water heater, because a lot of the energy in water heaters is actually lost through the heat seeking out of the core. So all this service is provided free of charge, and it's a great benefit to the customer because they can see the impacts of their energy savings right away. couple more programs. I'm going to run through these rather quickly, but there's also Home Performance with Energy Star program. That's a much more comprehensive audit where, again, we work with contractors who have certifications in the industry for energy efficiency. They have all kinds of diagnostic equipment. They spend several hours in a customer's home looking at all the nitty-gritty things, climbing in the crawl spaces, going up into the attics, checking the thickness of insulation, checking the health of the windows, what kind of panes are used, what sort of insulation is available in the home. And then the customer does have to put in about $100 for the cost of these audits. However, that is a buy down on the cost of a standard energy audit. Usually these energy audits cost in the neighborhood of about $500. So that is a deal, a discount to the customer. But at the end, they get this fantastic report that basically says, if you put insulation, if you put more insulation in your home, if you get that new heating, ventilation, and air conditioning system, you will see the payback for your investment in energy cost savings within a certain number of years. And a lot of customers are really surprised to know that if they do some insulation and they do some of these things, with our incentives, because we also help buy down the cost of doing some of that insulation and some of those bigger jobs, that they'll see paybacks in the range of 1 year for doing some of this work. So it's a really compelling information for customers to make the right decisions in their homes. We've also worked with new home builders to look at Energy Star qualified homes, which is basically a standard similar to the U.S. Green Building Council's, the LEED certification, but Energy Star qualified homes are just more energy efficient homes. And so we've been working with builders to provide them incentives to make sure that the building is above code. And additionally, the Income Eligible Energy Efficiency Program, which is actually administered by the Maryland Housing and Community Development Group, provides up to 50%, actually even more, higher percentages of energy efficiency measures to income qualified customers within our community. So we also help those who might not have some of the capital resources to outlay. So those are some of our residential energy efficiency programs. And now I'm going to move into a new program, or two programs, I should say, that are being bundled together. And you might have received mail about this because we've just launched a recent campaign called 2 Ways to Save. Many of your customers, many of you probably have smart meter installed in your home. And so we are moving towards more of a dynamic pricing model. But one of the ways that we're trying to help people better understand their energy use is to also let them know ways they can save money, ways they can help us even manage energy. Because as you can imagine, in the summer, when all those air conditioners are churning away, when people are using electricity, there's a lot of production going on through our business and commercial communities. We have a lot of draw on the demand on our grid and on our system. And so in order to keep that grid stability, sometimes what we need to do is sort of send out a little bit of an SOS message, if you will, to our customers to say, hey, can you curtail your energy use for a little bit? We need to kind of just stabilize the grid, make sure everything's continuing to flow well. And we also don't want to have to go into the marketplace and turn on some of those electricity generating systems that have sort of just been remaining idle. Because if we have to go turn those on, that means we're going to be releasing a whole lot more emissions. So we'd much rather just kind of reduce our energy use for a short period of time rather than having to go turn on a power plant that's going to create more pollution. So one of the ways we're trying to encourage customers to help us do this is giving them a signal. When we have one of these peak energy savings days, we'll notify customers to say, would you please reduce your energy use the next day? You can do a couple of these measures. And if you reduce your energy use by your baseline, which I'll explain what the baseline is in a moment, if you reduce your energy use, we'll give you credits off on your bill for doing that for us. So that's the Peak Energy Savings Credit Program, and I'll go into that in more detail. And the second way we're encouraging people to save this summer is through EnergyWise Rewards. And EnergyWise Rewards is a program where we install a device in customers' homes that actually automatically cycles off and on air conditioners for short periods of time on these select peak savings days. And so I'll explain a little bit more about that program as well. So the Peak Savings Program is a way that Maryland customers can get credits off on their bill. It's $1.25 per kilowatt hour reduced, and it's a completely voluntary program. Both of these programs are completely voluntary. You don't need to enroll in the program, but you do receive, every Pepco customer in Maryland will receive a phone call the day before a peak savings day. This phone call will go something along the lines of, tomorrow's a peak savings day. Please curtail your energy use between noon and 8 p.m. to earn credits off on your bill. The phone call is automatic. Customers can opt out of receiving the phone call if they choose to. They could also choose to receive a text and email just to get an additional notification about the Peak Energy Savings Day happening the next day. All of this can be managed through My Account, which is our online billing system at pepco.com, or of course they can call the 855-730-PEAK phone number. So what does it mean to reduce your energy use below your baseline? The way we calculate a baseline is we look at customers' energy use within a 30-day period, and we look at those days that they had the highest energy use. So in my example here, let's say day 1 you had 20 kilowatt hours, you used 20 kilowatt hours of energy. Day 2, about 18 kilowatt hours, and day 3, 15 kilowatt hours. So that means that your baseline for that 30-day period, your baseline of highest energy use is 18 kilowatt hours. So in the chart below, you can see a couple items that we suggest customers to do in order to save energy on a peak savings day. Just waiting to use the clothes dryer, maybe not doing laundry that day, delaying it so you're not using your clothes dryer, which is often an electric appliance. Raising your air conditioning setting by 1 to 3 degrees. You probably won't notice the difference in your home, particularly if you shade the windows, close the windows, make sure things are nice and tightly sealed. Avoid cooking in the oven that day, because certainly, as you can imagine, the more heat that you're putting into your home, the harder your air conditioning might have to work. And also simple things like turning off the lights and turning off the TV, making sure those video games are unplugged from the kids or the grandkids, stuff like that. So we think that this is a really valuable program to our customers. We think it helps people understand a little bit more about how they're using energy, and also gives them a nice incentive to curtail their energy use. And the second way to save energy this summer is a voluntary peak energy management program. EnergyWise Rewards has actually been in the community since about 2009. We currently have over 136,000 devices installed throughout Pepco Maryland territory. These devices, as you see here, it's a web programmable thermostat. The web programmable thermostat can be accessed through the My Account page. So people, if they're on vacation and they think, oh gosh, I forgot to put that permanent hold while we're going to be away, they can log on to their account, set their settings, even from their smartphone or iPad. And so it's a really handy tool for the customers. If customers already have a programmable thermostat that they like, they can choose the outdoor switch. And that's what that gray box is to the right. And the outdoor switch basically just acts as a big circuit breaker, so that when we want to cycle the air conditioner compressor, it just acts as an on-off switch. So EnergyWise Rewards, unlike some of the other programs that I described earlier, is available to Maryland and District of Columbia customers. So what we do is, on those peak savings days, we send the signal to the air conditioner to cycle it for short periods of time. We only cycle on Mondays through Fridays, and only for a couple hours between noon and 8 p.m. As I said, this program has been in operation since 2009, and on average we have about 5 peak energy savings days per summer in which we've implemented these conservation periods. And so last summer, I believe we did have 5 of them, and that worked out to be a total of 16 hours for the entire summer in which we were doing the cycling of the air conditioner. So it's, depending on customers' lifestyles, it might not be that intrusive, but I know where I am from noon till about 7 p.m. every day. So I think other customers, are not often at home during those times. So sometimes they might not even know that they went through a cycling period that day. But they do receive credits off on their bills. And it's important to note, too, through EnergyWise rewards, if there were ever an instance where a customer said, you know, the kid's home sick today, or I need to do X, Y, and Z in my house, it's just not a good day for this to happen, customers have 2 opportunities a summer to call us and say, today's not a good day, please don't cycle me. And so we won't. And so if we had 5 peak savings days last year, and you have 2 opportunities to opt out, there really is some flexibility about how customers can participate in this program. So what does that mean for our customers? Well, when we install the device, if they choose the 50% cycling level, they get an installation credit of about $40. And then each summer they continue to participate in the program, they'll get another $40 off on their summer electricity bills. You can see there's also a couple options at the 75% level and also the 100% level. What the 100% level means is that during this conservation period, the air conditioner compressor would be shut off entirely, which means that no cooled air would be brought into the home. Whereas at the 50% or the 75% cycling level, the air conditioner compressor would still be allowed to operate for short intervals within that 2 to 3 hour conservation period span. One important thing to note is that the air conditioner's fan continues to cycle during this conservation period. So the already cooled air that's in the home continues to circulate and people still remain comfortable and cool. It's just that the compressor is not pumping out, fresh, cooled air every couple of minutes like it would if it was under normal operation. So as I mentioned before, there are huge benefits to this program, and one of the biggest ones is just to reduce overall peak demand. That really helps to balance our electricity grid, keep supply consistent, but most importantly, certainly to me, and what gets me really excited about these programs is that, like the standard phrase that probably people have heard before, the best kilowatt is one not used. So any time that we can reduce our electricity use and reduce that peak demand, we're really keeping emissions out of our air, and that's the whole point. Just a quick note on the District of Columbia's energy programs. Green Energy DC is really the place to go for DC residents, and it's all managed by the District Department of the Environment. So greendc.gov for more programs and information. They do have some energy efficiency programs available. And just really quickly, because I know there are some businesses in the community, we have great opportunities for businesses also to green their operations, and certainly that is really important as a lot of businesses are trying to go green and take that environmental ethic both to their staff and into their customers. So the existing buildings program, the small business customer program, are 2 that provide incentives for lighting, refrigeration, all kinds of insulation, other things that other systems in a business that might need upgrading, that might need some more advanced energy efficiency measures. The custom incentive program is sort of a catch-all because we recognize that businesses have different operational needs and have different demands. So any business that has one of those unique demands that doesn't fit nicely into the existing buildings program or the new construction program or the small business program, we can look at the projected energy savings of that particular project and make an assessment as to whether that will really yield good energy efficiency results. And so I won't spend a lot of time there because I think really some of the numbers speak for themselves. It's interesting to me to always kind of think about lighting in parking garages because it's such a safety measure, but it's also really a big draw of energy. And so parking garages, interesting enough, if they get retrofitted with LED lights that still provide the same amount of foot candles and lumens to light the area safely, but just with more efficient lighting, we can really see a lot of energy savings. And so you can see that 13% of this project's cost in the parking garage was paid for by Petco incentives. But with those energy savings, the return on investment for that project is about 2 years. An office building getting a variable frequency drive for about 45, with an incentive that takes care of 45% of the cost, can also yield a lot of energy savings. And it's great to see that nonprofit organizations and organizations like churches and congregations can also benefit from these programs, because certainly they have budgets, they have tight budgets and high demands and high operating costs. And so our church example here provided 44% of the cost of the project, but those savings yielded about $200 each year from just having a more energy efficient HVAC system in their operations. So those are just some examples that speak to the power of these programs. And that is about all for me. I just really invite questions, and I also appreciate your time this evening and ask that you take some of this information and share it with your constituents and your residents. I'll be happy to send this presentation on to anyone who could use it, because certainly there's a ton of information in here, and there's always good to have notes to refer to. But all the information is on pepco.com, and we'd be happy to answer any questions, or just feel free to contact me at some point in the future, and I'll get you sent in the right direction.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
It's a pretty comprehensive approach to reduction in energy consumption, and it's right in line with what the city is trying to do and what we're looking to hear from our Committee on the Environment and work on our sustainability goals. And it ties into some resolutions that we have following this item on goals that we're setting for ourselves. And it seems like it's pretty comprehensive. It's basically in response to a program that the state of Maryland funded that provides the way for these things to happen.
That's correct. There are a lot of ways that utilities and states work together across the country. Back in a former life, I worked on the Energy Star program and was able to see models that were implemented in the Northwest and also New York and the Northeast. A lot of those states have something called a system benefits charge, where customers, have a little surcharge on their bill that pays into programs like this. The Empower Maryland program sort of took that model, but also attached a goal to it, a very defined goal of, the 15% reduction by 2015. And it's been supported by all of the utilities that serve the state of Maryland, as well as some of the energy generators who are looking into renewable sources throughout the state. And so it's been well received, and we are doing our darndest to get there. We certainly do have to report to the Public Service Commission about our goals, and in some of our programs have been a little more successful than other programs. So some of these programs have exceeded their goals. Other ones we're still, trying to spread the word and increase customer awareness about what these programs do, how customers can take advantage of them. So that's really important, again, just to stress the consumer education about these things, because, first of all, customers are already buying into the system. They should certainly take advantage of the opportunity.
And it's good to see that there are some programs there for multifamily buildings as well, since we have a lot of multifamily buildings here who can be interested in getting some of these savings. And I believe you brought some materials with you that you put on the table over there.
Yes, I do have some of the brochures there.
And so anybody who's here who wants information can pick that up. And I'm assuming you'll leave the ones that don't get picked up so that we can put them out and other people can get them as well.
That would be excellent. Thank you.
Thanks. Councilmember Mayo?
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. The first question, we have a copy of this PowerPoint now, but is it something we can also put on our website and make available to anybody who wants to look at it?
That would be wonderful. I'd appreciate that. Yeah.
Great. And is there any chance you have, for example, pre-recorded videos that give the same presentation in Spanish or other languages that we could use?
I wish I did. Unfortunately, the Spanish language materials are a little slim at this point. We do have customer service representatives, though, certainly through our call center, that customers can choose the Spanish option and get to the same information.
Okay.
But you're right, that is something we need to work on.
If you could follow up and just help me figure out how to follow that track,
Okay.
that would be great.
Okay.
And then my last question was the Peak Energy Savings Credit Program. I just wanted to check to find out whether that program is also eligible to people that don't have HVAC installed. It's everyone?
Oh, yes. The
Okay.
Peak Energy Savings Program is everyone. If you live in an apartment and pay your bill, if you live in a home and pay your bill, absolutely. The only case where it's really not available to customers is that they live in one of those master metered apartment buildings
Sure.
where they pay their utilities through their rent. Then it's, we wouldn't have their account information, we wouldn't have their contact information to ask them to reduce.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Smith.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Like the mayor said, we do have a lot of multifamily buildings in the city. What is the average savings a tenant could expect if they go through this program?
The Peak Energy Savings Program specifically, we are estimating that people are probably, if we have a peak savings day once a month, we're estimating that if customers really cut back on their baseline and reduce their demand, that they could save about $5 a month, because it is $1.25 per kilowatt hour reduced. And in that chart that I demonstrated, those were just a couple samples of what people could do. But certainly if they decided to not use a lot of hot water that day, if they had an electric hot water heater, and a number of things. We have other brochures and pamphlets that have more detailed lists of what people can do, but we're thinking about $5 a month.
Now, you had a list of all the incentives if a commercial owner brought in some of these energy efficient, HVAC units or whatever. Can you provide that type of information for multifamilies, or would it be different from the office building example you gave?
Oh, so for the incentives available to the property managers of yes, I think I do have that information available, and I'd be happy to share that with you. One of my colleagues would be better suited to provide that, but there's a list.
Is it possible you could update your slide deck and put it in there?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Councilmember Schultz.
I'm just curious about one aspect of savings, and that is, you mentioned the importance during peak energy of like turning off televisions. But as we all know that our houses are full of electronics, that when you turn them off, they're really still on, because they always have these little red lights, and you walk around the house in the pitch dark, and there's all these things blinking, and so when you're talking about turning things off, how off are we talking about? Do you understand?
Absolutely, absolutely. You're absolutely right. That chart in there should have specifically the power strips, because if everyone were to use those power strips, and have that central location of where their DVD player and their television were plugged into, that would certainly decrease that vampire load, as we call it. And so, yes, the power strips would be the way that we would need to unplug, and that certainly saves residents time from going around pulling all the plugs.
Do you have I'm sure you do from studies, an estimate of how much we spend, typical households, on so-called vampire energy because of the way electronics are designed that didn't used to be that way?
Right. Off the top of my head, if I'm remembering back from my Energy Star days, I don't know the absolute kilowatt hours for an entire household, although I do recall that a television, particularly the flat screen kind, the LCD versions, they could use up to 4 kilowatt hours a day. And that's not even from the television being on. So yes, those are very large energy draws. And so if you add up that one television with the DVD player, perhaps even with that coffee maker, because it has the timer on it, what have you, you're talking significant.
Yes, I know.
Right there, you're at your $5 a day.
There you go.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Councilmember Siemens.
Thank you for the presentation. You mentioned that you do recycling of major appliances. Do you have a phone number for people to call for a pickup of appliance?
Yes, it's actually the phone number here. It's the 866-353-5798 number. That number is for residents to use for all of the programs that I've described. So we do have a little bit of a phone tree structure, but if they click on the one for appliances, it might be option 2 in our menu. They'll be able to schedule a pickup that way.
All right, is there a limit on the volume of those?
I don't believe so. I really don't, because we are so adamant about getting those older appliances off the grid. We'll take them.
Great, thank you.
How many do you have?
$50 for a refrigerator? Several.
Councilmember Daniels going.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for your presentation, Susan. It was remarkable and very, very, very interesting. I don't have too intelligent a question to ask because Councilmember Siemens got me on the pick up the appliances. And this may not be your bailiwick, but 7, 8 years ago, if you called Pepco, they'd come and trim around the electrical wires that went from the pole to your house. And I know it's not an energy saving, well, it saves a lot of energy if a tree falls on the wires. But is that it, 866-353?
No, that would be our standard phone number, our standard Pepco contact number.
Okay.
And I believe that's...
I got you. You're on my speed dial.
Okay.
All right. If I could get Jerry Pasternak's number on my speed dial, I have it too.
I might be able to work that out.
I just call Bruce and see if he'll call Jerry. So.
Yeah, no, that would be our regular number, and I do believe that we still do the tree trimming program, and also because Tacoma Park is the tree city, you may have heard before around Earth Day this past year, we were giving away trees.
Yes.
Also,
yes.
And for customers to plant them in good locations, and we actually had a website that helped people choose a good location in their yard so that it shaded the home and also didn't interrupt power lines. I'm not sure. I think we might be out of trees at this point, but we may be doing that again in the future.
We're never out of trees. We can always find trees in the woods somewhere. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. I really appreciate
Thank you for your time.
your sticking around for a little longer than you expected.
Yeah.
And I know that you said you could stick around for a couple minutes for anybody who has any questions. We're going to take a short break, and so that'll give you an opportunity for anybody who's here who has any questions to approach you. Thanks.
Very much.
We'll take a short break, and we'll be back in about 10 minutes. We're back. And we'll pick up where we left off. We've got 2 special session items, both resolutions declaring our intent. And the Public Works Director's here, and you've provided us with some additional information over what was in the packet. So take it away.
I know it's been a long evening for you already, but I just wanted to take a minute and tie together a few threads that are obviously running through the evening about energy efficiency and greening our power supply. One is to do an early shout out for our July 29th community forum that the Brendel Group is going to be hosting with us related to our sustainability action plan and the initial plan proposals. So that's going to be taking place on that 5th Monday in July when you all don't have a council meeting. So we're taking advantage of that evening, and it's been advertised in the newsletter, but I'd really appreciate all your help in publicizing that and working with us to try to raise awareness so folks know what's being proposed. As you all know, the initial sustainability action plan is looking at a way to garner energy improvements in the community. The city has done quite a bit for its own infrastructure over the years since the mid-'90s, but we haven't really figured out how to cross that bridge or to reach out to the multifamily, the commercial, the residential housing stock in particular in our city. So this first step of the action plan is trying to identify ways and methods to do that, and we need input from people, we need participation, and we're hoping to generate a lot of energy and excitement around the opportunities that our consultants are going to be talking about. So starting from there and then stepping back, early this year we were notified of a program that the Maryland Energy Administration was starting called Smart Energy Communities, and it's building on a number of efforts, some of which you just heard the folks from PEPCO talking about that the governor has championed. One of which is this Empower Maryland, which is trying to reduce electricity use by 15% by a certain year. There's also efforts to green the power supply in the state, and there's programs to motivate folks to try to get at least 20% of their power from green supply. And then there's also efforts to improve fuel efficiency and fuel consumption, reduce fuel consumption in vehicles. So the Maryland Energy Administration has rolled out this Smart Energy Communities program. We initially sent a letter of intent in March and an application in April, and were notified a couple of months ago that we're eligible for about $60,000 in the initial grant. It's based on the number of applications that the state received back and the funding they have. And the first step in the process is for the formal body of the city to indicate its serious intent to engage in becoming a smart energy community in Maryland. There are 2 of 3 initiatives that the city has to sign on to. One is one option is to reduce our energy use for city facilities only. This isn't a community-based thing, but really geared towards government buildings by 15%. The other is to provide 20% of our power by the year 2022 from green supply. And the third is to reduce the fuel use in city vehicles by 15% over a 5-year period. So taking a look at the 3 options and knowing that we need to select 2, it's staff recommendation that we go with the 15% electricity use in a 5-year period over a base year and the 20% green power provision. We feel fairly confident, we're still running the numbers, that together with our current solar system, both on this building as well as the Public Works building, and credit for our geothermal system at the Public Works facility, that will be very close, if not exceed that 20% green power usage. The programs that we're also involved in, for instance, where we purchase wind energy through renewable energy credits, isn't entitled to be counted in those programs because it really has to be a self-generating green power. It can't be power that we pay for or get from another entity. It has to be power that we're producing ourselves in our facilities. So the resolutions you have before you tonight are to move that process forward and to formally notify the state that we're selecting 2 of the 3 proposals. And some of the questions that I got back and the information I handed out tonight, there's a chart within both of the resolutions that we fill out annually for the state. So what I gave you is our initial information from FY12 in terms of energy use from our facilities. This is not our entire energy profile because we also do street lights and park lights and things like that, but it's the building use energy that we're currently requiring. It also starts the category of tracking our renewable energy generated, and as you can see on that first chart that I handed out that's almost got some color on it, that because it was FY12, some of our systems weren't fully installed yet, so some of the green power production will be showing up in years FY13 and beyond. And I've explained in the notes below where some of the energy associated with our renewable energy power is coming from, and the fact that our public works system wasn't put into business until July 2012, so that's not showing at all, nor is our geothermal credits. So basically what you see there is based on building size and based on our electricity use. You can see kind of where we stand in terms of our conventional electricity and our renewable energy use in 2012. The second chart just lists out a monthly statements of our electricity use. energy use is something that I've been interested in since the 90s. So we have copious records about the city's facilities' energy use since 1994. So if anybody wants to go down a really memory lane, I'd be happy to talk to you about energy efficiency. And we were very engaged with PEPCO in the 90s, 94 and 96. We took advantage of a lot of their rebate programs here in the city facility, upgraded lighting, changed out our chiller. This morning we walked 4 different auditing firms through our building. One of the first steps we'd like to do with our grant money is to have a formal energy audit done of this building and at Hefner Park with the purpose of identifying energy improvements that we could make on a short-term, medium-term, and long-term basis, at kind of the best way to sort of set ourselves up. We're pretty well prepared with our equipment replacement reserve for funding some of the major equipment that we need to maintain to keep the city working. And so together with that, as well as the audit, we hope we can identify a roadway for us to easily get to that 15% energy reduction over the numbers that you see here. So what you have before you are the 2 resolutions. We're hoping that, unless there's any questions, we can proceed. To say a word about why we didn't select the fuel use, I mean, we do have a program to bring on hybrid fueled vehicles when there's an opportunity. And I think now we're up to 9 of our 75 vehicles in the city are hybrid fueled vehicles. So we'll hope to continue that each year. We buy 1 or 2, or some years as many as 3, as an alternative to the gasoline-powered vehicles. So we're moving in that direction. But given the take-home vehicle policy in our police department and the heavy use of police vehicles in our fleet, being able to achieve a 15% reduction in fuel use in the next 5 years is not something we see as eminently doable for us unless we were to take a really severe, it would take a real severe change of operation in order to accomplish that goal. So the other 2 goals we feel we can easily accomplish. Become a smart energy community. It's not to say we're not going to work on the fuel use reduction. I'd be happy again to produce information that can show you kind of where we are with vehicle numbers and fuel use over time. And we can certainly take aggressive steps to try to reduce that fuel use. So I don't mean to discount it in any way. I just feel of the 3 options, it's probably the least reachable for us at this point in time.
Thanks. Councilmember Schultz.
Vera, I wanted to ask you, the grant, or do we get the grant now on our promise that we're going to reach these goals, or do we have to reach the goals first in order to get?
They will give us the money before we've actually accomplished it. I've been on a few webinars with state folks explaining the programs. They have to approve everything we're doing. So once we send them these resolutions, that'll be the next box checked in the process. Then after we get our energy audit complete, we'll come up with a plan that we have to provide to the state, which basically says, here's how we're going to reach our goal of 15% electricity reduction over 5 years. And we lay out the equipment we're going to buy or the changes we're going to make and what percentage we think that's going to reduce of our power. They're willing to provide us some funds, up to $14,000 of that, almost $60,000, towards an energy audit. So we're hoping to use some of the funds right off the bat to help pay down the cost of the energy audit. And then additional monies that are left we'll use towards implementing those programs. As I mentioned, we feel like we're going to be pretty close to the green power goal with our current operations, so we don't think we'll necessarily have to do a whole lot with that. And in fact, the 2 goals kind of work tandem. As you're reducing your electricity load, you're actually increasing, even if you don't change it, increasing the percentage of green power just based on dropping your electricity use.
That's a good point.
So we think that we'll be pretty close to being able to do that one with our efficiency measures.
Let me ask you one really hard question, and that is, suppose the energy audit, they come in here and they look at our atrium, and they say, gee, that's not a very energy efficient way to design a building because you're losing all this heat and or whatever we're losing up through that whole thing.
Yeah.
And I say, you got to do something about that.
Well, the audits don't tend to necessarily encourage you to change the structure of your building because those are usually high-ticket kind of costs, and you're getting to an aesthetic there that would probably be walking them down a losing path. I think that there'll be enough measures right within, for instance, I don't know if you've noticed, but in our back parking lot, we changed all our parking lot lights to LEDs. We used to have high-pressure sodium lights. We've yet to do that in the front parking lot. So all the lights on the building, around the exterior of the building, all the lights in the parking level in the first floor, they're all high-pressure sodium. Obviously, LEDs are more expensive, but they're enormously efficient. So we feel like there's an opportunity, even though those lights were installed 2006, 2007, they were good technology at the time, but it's really changed a lot since then. So we think there'll be things within our existing building structure. We know we have some aging air handler units. We've changed out some. We have money in this year's capital budget to change another one in the police department in the following year, another one after that. So, we do have some capital projects planned in to improve the efficiency. So we're assuming with things like lighting, controls of the HVAC system, as well as improving some old equipment, we'll be hoping to reach that goal.
Thank you. Councilor Romeo.
Thank you. I think I support both of these resolutions. I looked online at the program information, and it looks like the base year for us to start at is actually last year's is 2012. So in other words, the installations on the Public Works building would count as not as our baseline, right? They would count as an additional reduction. Is that correct?
For our green power?
For our green power, yeah. For the green
power. Yeah. And again, I've been a bit confused. In the webinars we've sat in on, they do have some flexibility as to which base year you can go as far as back as you'd like. However, with some of these goals, you have to accomplish it within 5 years. And they don't want you to choose a different year for your 15% energy reduction as your baseline compared to your green power. So once we pick a year, we have to stick with it for all our goals. We bounced back and forth. It's a little bit of an odd timing situation for us. In 2010, the Public Works facility was unoccupied because it was going through renovation, so we lost a year there where our energy use will be, bottomed down to nothing. And of course, the building is larger now than it was 2009. So we're really comparing apples to grapes practically. So for a lot of reasons, it probably looks like 2012 will be the year just because that's when our Public Works facility is fully operational. This building was operational. The auditorium was renovated. It really is truly a base year in terms of our operations.
Would the rec building on New Hampshire Avenue need to count as part of our?
We don't own it, so unless you own the building, you can't count it.
Okay.
We do pay for the power. That's a fairly recent change with Park and Planning. We are paying for the power, but we don't own the building, so it's not included in our stock.
And the third thing is that I sent an email to the director of the program, and he indicated that they would follow up Walt. I can't remember Walt's last name, but you may know the answer to this, which is the question I asked him was whether if, for example, we paid to put solar panels on the roof of lower income residents' homes, whether, as long as we purchased the RECs, the renewable energy credits associated with that, whether we could count that as part of our contribution.
Yeah, I have heard from them. It did generate quite a bit of think tanking on the part of MEA from your question, and they were excited by the options. Their suggestion back to us is if we were looking at ways to increase the amount of green power available to folks, that we would take a look at leasing roof space from adjacent buildings, be it the school, be it a high-rise building. I've often wondered if we just did an aerial photo of the city and started looking at the large roof masses with few options. If we were to lease the space from them, put the panels on, and then the rest of it gets a little murky to me. Sell the power, make the power available, I'm not quite sure how that would then translate unless we were buying it for our own purposes. This particular program is really geared towards government energy use. It's not geared towards community energy use. So what they're trying to motivate is reductions in government facilities power use. So if we were to lease additional building space to put solar panels on through a PPA or some other type of program and then purchase the power for ourselves to show the reduction, that would be a program they'd explore. They're also very interested in encouraging more geothermal, and we still have not seen how those calculations worked out. We got into this conversation about fission versus fusion, and they lost me pretty quickly in the discussion. But apparently our geothermal system at Public Works, because it's using energy from the earth, there's a way to capture that value, put a credit on it, and use it towards our green power.
Well, I mentioned that I'd be very interested in that, roof leasing option or space option,
Mhm.
because whether it's, the church at the corner of Jackson and 410, which has the most glorious sunny roof in the world,
Mhm.
or homes in, somewhat lower income parts of the community where solar penetration has been very low, but where they often have very low shade, we would really sort of be making a mark and attracting people to,
And there may be ways to do that, maybe just not ideally through this program.
And I think Brendel may also be a group that has expertise in dealing with this very question, so thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions on these? Okay, it sounds like we're ready to proceed to vote on these resolutions. Would somebody like to introduce the first resolution?
So moved. Second.
Moved by Councilmember Smith, second by Councilmember Siemens. Any additional council comments? Any public comments? All those in favor of this resolution, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes unanimously, 7-0. We'll move to the second one. Would somebody like to move that one?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilmember Daniels Cohen, seconded by Councilmember Schultz. Any additional council comments? Any public comments? Mr. Lovelace in the back.
Hello, my name's Pat Lovelace, your official peace delegate, 7620 Maple Avenue, Tacoma Park, Maryland. I just wanted to tell you I'm really glad to see the city council in Tacoma Park doing their best to help our environment. We got to realize that we're very short on supplies of oil and stuff, coal, and it's really destroying our environment, our atmosphere, and everything, and making the weather and stuff hotter and more erratic, more and more superstorms. I'm glad to see that you people are taking part in trying to do it. I was down at the Keystone Pipeline demonstration also on Tuesday, and I was thinking of what Tacoma Park is doing for our environment. I'm thinking, man, you guys are really doing a lot. So please keep up the good work, and remember, this is not our world. It's our children and our grandchildren's world. We must make it a better place for them to grow and thrive in. Thank you very much for what you're doing.
Thank you for your comments. Any additional public comments? Okay. All those in favor of the resolution, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it unanimously. We will now move to our work session, and we have a update from the Committee on the Environment. And thank you all for hanging in there as well.
Hi, I'm Cindy DeBella. I'm one of the co-chairs of the new Committee on the Environment, and the other co-chair, Sajiwan Ilkasa, is out of town, which is why he's not here. And the group decided to not have everybody show up. If you want everybody to show up, they're willing to do it, but we decided to do it this way for now. So we're new. We've been meeting since January. We've lost a couple people. We've gained a couple of new people. We have 13 now out of a maximum of 15. So there's still room for 2 more if there's anybody in your ward that's interested. We've been meeting monthly. We've adopted bylaws, elected co-chairs. We've established some ways of working. We've gotten some great support and advice from the Department of Public Works. And we've been working pretty closely with the Brendel Group. So to be very brief, our priorities for now are the sustainability plan that the Director of Public Works referred to, and trying to take the first step on certification for Sustainable Maryland. So there are other issues, as you know, that we've been working on and been asked to attend to. But that's where we want to do a few things well. That's the sense of the group. very action-oriented, very energetic, and very dedicated. I've been pretty impressed, actually, with the group. We've got a couple of subcommittees looking at different issues as they come up, nothing formal, but just kind of, people have stepped up, 2-3 people tackle an issue, come back to the next meeting. And we went through, even though our direction from you was to look at Sustainable Maryland, we went through and looked at a bunch of other certification programs, federal and state programs that are out there, and came back to Sustainable Maryland was the top choice, with actually Energy Smart Communities was the runner-up. I went back and looked at that doodle vote. And so we are trying to fit what Tacoma Park has already done, the progress report that the Task Force on the Environment did on implementation of their recommendations, and trying to fit that in with the Sustainable Maryland framework. They had I think it was June 1st deadline. They have periodic deadlines for filing, and we weren't able. We talked about doing part of an application just to say we had done it, and then the pesticide thing came up, and we just said, well, let's just do it right. Let's do it in the next quarter, which is, I think, September 30th, October 1st is the next window for Sustainable Maryland. And what we're hoping is not just to get a certificate, because frankly, with what Tacoma Park has done already, we could probably come pretty close to hitting it without doing anything new. But to use it as a way to target things that can be done, first the easy stuff, then maybe the longer-term hard stuff. Using the sustainability plan, which is going to focus, as you already know, primarily on energy efficiency activities and reducing greenhouse gas emissions, but that's only a piece. There's a whole bunch of other environmental issues that go along with Sustainable Maryland besides that. So use that as a way to discuss and target what the next few things are that we as a committee want to do. So in a nutshell, that's kind of where we're at. You're all looking a little puzzled. A lot of process, but we've only been doing this for a few months and we're still getting to know each other. Daryl mentioned the July 29th community meeting on the sustainability plan efforts. We are meeting prior to that by webinar, by electronically. We are meeting as a committee with Brendel to get a sort of a preview of what is being proposed and to give them some feedback before they hit the community meeting on what we think is going to fly and not fly, what's appropriate for Tacoma. And that's July 10th. July 10th can I invite? So any of you that are interested in signing on for that for July 10th, if that's what I thought. We'll make sure you get in on it. We're probably going to meet at your place.
Yeah, or I can go with Rocco's. Or...
Oh yeah, it's going to be Rocco's because he's got the hookup. We'll get it to you. And we hope to have by next Monday a answer to some of your questions, your more technical questions on the Safe Grow Zone ordinance. We are working on trying to get consensus with the group as opposed to a majority and then a minority opinion, because we're new. We want to see if we can get everybody on the same page. It's taken a little longer perhaps than anticipated, but I think we're going to be able to serve something up for you for next Monday. We are pleased with the Brendel group so far, and as I said, we are hoping to use Sustainable Maryland to target the other issues. When we did the priority check, the two other issues that came up for the group were open space and public health. And by public health, I think people really meant chemicals. Looking back on it now, that's, I think, what people were really talking about. So that gives you sort of an idea where we're going. Any comments or questions?
Super.
Councilmember Smith.
Thank you. Thank you for being here tonight. When you guys are looking at the Safe Grow Zone proposal, are you also reviewing some of the points that opposition has made?
We made a list of all the questions that at the time the council members had, and I can give you a copy as soon as I'm done talking. And they were more technical. They were more about the science and the role of the precautionary principle, things like that. So when we had our first work session, our first meeting on this, all these people came and talked to us. And we've expanded a little bit, but we're trying to stick to what it is we got asked and not to get sidetracked onto things that are largely really more your role. You know, is this something you want to do? Well, we can tell you about the science. We can tell you about the pros and cons that way. But when it comes down to it, some of these other issues are really not our business unless you really want to directly ask us, which I'm not sure I would suggest. Okay. So, I mean, we could do it, but we made a decision to really narrow in on it and not to get too. We listened, and it influenced, I got to say, in a big way what we had started out with, but in a more roundabout fashion. We're not directly saying, well, you know, what about enforcement? What about businesses in Tacoma Park? What about the lawn care guys? We're trying to stick to the science piece.
Okay.
Councilmember Mayo.
Thank you. I just would, it would be great to work together with the committee to get as many people to the 29th, the meeting on the 29th as possible. So, you know, if there's a flyer or something that was developed, and if there's a way that certainly the members of the task force could, or the committee, I'm sorry, could help, you know, distribute that, we might be able to get the news out to as many people as possible.
Yeah, the plan was to start with the newsletter and then go from there. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I promise if you all ever have a meeting that's not on a Monday night at 7:30, I'll come to at least one of them.
Yeah.
You may not want that, but that's.
Oh no, the more the merrier. That's the way it's been so far. So this group, I just to add a little, we kind of left ourselves open for this. Didn't realize what was going to happen, but we decided as a group that we would have a public comment period at the beginning of every meeting. We're not a public hearing. We're not a formal legal whatever. But we have had now 3 separate meetings. People come talk about issues. Just walk in. You know, they're not on the committee. They have something on their mind that relates to the environment. And and only one of those times was it Safe Grow. It was other things too. So it's actually kind of. I mean, it did allow us to get a lot of input on Safe Grow, but it also has allowed for some very interesting conversations on other topics. So feel free to tell your folks in your ward to come talk to us about a particular issue.
Has anyone brought up the Flower Avenue Green Street project?
No. Okay.
Thank you.
Councilmember Schultz.
Cindy, thank you for your input here. First of all, I want to applaud the fact that you're having a public comment period for your committee meetings. I think that's a terrific idea.
It's a bold step.
Well, it's bold. It takes a little courage to do that because you're sort of opening the barn door. You don't know what's going to come in. A couple questions. The July 29th presentation by the Brindle Group, pardon my ignorance on this, but is this their final report that they're going to be making, or it's interim?
This is the midterm check-in. Go to the community before you have a final report and hear what people have to say. Have I got that?
September.
Basically right.
Okay, so this is even, okay, that's good to know because that means that people can be really motivated to think, to know that they can have an influence on the final report.
Yeah, the timing is not ideal, the middle of the summer like that, but to meet the rest of the objectives and the timing of city budgets and all of that, this is when it is, so.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, there's always going to be timing, if it's during the
There's
school
always
year,
some,
you'll hear
yeah.
people say, well, it's during the school year. We got to stay home and put the kids to bed and all this other stuff. The other question is, you talked about getting to the first step done towards the Sustainability Maryland application. Is that what I heard you say?
Yes.
And can you kind of elaborate on what that
Yeah,
means?
Sustainable Maryland
I understand
is
the big picture.
the program, right? So there's
yeah.
categories, and
Yeah.
you show that you've done a certain number of things in that category, and they check the box for you. And that's what we're doing. So going section by section, we could have sent in the first two, but we thought, let's just send it in where we have a shot at actually being close to achieving the standard before we even really get going.
Okay.
Yeah. Do you have anything more you want to say about that? Because you've met with the committee a couple times, the group. Yeah, okay.
And I'm just remembering on that there was some part of it where our oversight group on that Sustainable Maryland Certified was going to be the Committee on the Environment and the Council.
That's right.
And I'm just wondering how that fits into what you're talking about.
Yeah, that was going to be the green team.
Yeah, the green team,
Yeah.
the Sustainable Certified makes you have to have a green team in order to, one of the boxes that get checked is to have a green team. And the committee, I think, in concert with the council, was going to represent that green team. But I don't really know what that means in terms of, can you just say you've been established and appointed by the council and
Well,
that's it?
yeah, I think, and you tell us what you want, but we were thinking that first, you've established us, we exist, there's stuff going on, and then second, that we were going to come to you with the checklist and say, here's what we're submitting, here's what we've submitted last week, right in that time frame. Here's what it is. Here's the things we've done so far. And obviously, to develop what we as a community have done so far, we're working with Public Works and a couple of the other departments.
I guess I would just caution that we probably ought to check before we get too far down the road toward being ready to submit, and just double check with the organization and say, is what we're intending to do as far as that green team aspect, make sure that what we're going to do is going to satisfy them so that we don't think we're at a certain point and then find out we have to kind of backtrack.
Okay.
And I would just follow up on that, if I might. Which is that if when that checklist was ready, we all just met, which is I think the way we set it up as a joint body, that would satisfy the
Okay.
process. We would meet as
Yeah.
one group. We would say, I'm assuming vote and together and say this is what we'd want to submit, and that would be sort of a substantive meeting.
That might do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was.
Yeah, okay, so a joint, can we do it on a Monday night, or do we have to do it before 7:30, or how would we logistically do that since?
We'll work that out.
We'll work that out. Okay, never mind. Yeah, we can do that. Anything else?
Councilmember Daniels-Cohen.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Cindy. What a great report. Articulated well. Yeah. You never think you articulate well, but you put it all
Short and
together really, really nicely. On the 29th, you said it was a forum, but does it have like some little words between and so that there's more poof to it?
Yeah, I think the goal or the idea is that the Brendel Group will present their initial findings on our emissions inventory. So they'll basically be updating the old emissions inventory we have, basically to show what kind of greenhouse gas emissions are coming from what sector of our community. We've also been able to dovetail, kind of interestingly, that information on electricity use in particular with ZIP+4 zip code on the GIS maps. So we've been finding some really fascinating street-by-street information that shows areas of the city that are higher energy users than others. For instance, my street is like one of the highest energy users in the city. We're the darker color. Why is that? I don't know, a bunch of old homes? I'm not sure, but we haven't really analyzed it yet, but we're really getting to some very helpful, detailed information as technology improves, and PEPCO is now reporting energy use in a ZIP+4 format, which is a very tiny little square of information. It can't tell you house by house. You don't get that kind of information unless you're talking to the property owner, but it can tell you in that ZIP+4 neighborhood what the per square footage energy use is in an area and how it relates to another small little ZIP+4 area. So they'll be presenting that kind of general information to kind of paint the picture of here's where our energy is being used, here's where our emissions are coming from, and then here's a series of programs to try to get a handle on that, again with this focus of being community-based and helping to grow efficiency programs in the neighborhood. So they're going to lay out by sector some proposed program ideas that they've been bouncing off the committee and city staff since they've started with us in February. And some of that you saw in their presentation early on, how they have it divided up by sectors, and there'll be a multifamily sector, a commercial sector, a residential sector, and they'll have some program goals. And then the idea for the meeting will be to get input from people. Yes, I like that, I don't like that, we should do this program, that program. It will be very participatory in terms of once they've kind of laid the foundation and brought us up to the same kind of general knowledge about what we're dealing with. Then they will lay out programs based on things they've seen in other states, programs that PEPCO and other organizations have. There are a lot of programs in the state of Maryland. They were quite impressed compared to some other states around the country. Now, reality testing those programs is yet to be seen, but on paper, the state of Maryland has got pretty aggressive programs at least available in the written word. So that's the kind of thing that the forum will be doing, really just kind of laying out information and trying to gauge people's interest. And it won't reach everybody, but we're hoping that we'll get enough of a flavor of the different sectors present so that we can really start fine-tuning the report that will then hopefully come back to you for a final presentation in September or October is the timeline for the final action plan. Also between now and September and October, if there's a program that really seems to coalesce and there's a lot of momentum around, we can start that implementation planning, which is also available through them for getting us further along than just a paper report, but actually implementing a program as we start.
It's also a fabulous idea to allow talks for the good of the committee or whatever. I always did mine at the end, but at the beginning of your meeting is probably much more effective. And also, it seems to me that it would cause people to want to be on committees, not to be shut down, to actually know that they're, that they're going to be heard. And not just your committee, but other committees that might be a way of life for committees. I mean, I know it's a step on the dark side, but it still gives people an opportunity to speak their mind. And of course, I'm not surprised about that at all. I'm sure that was your idea. So. Great job. I'm excited. What I'm really excited about is something's happening in the sustainability environmental area. And I think when we all came on, the council 2 years ago, nothing was happening. And now there's something moving. It's moving forward. It's a living, breathing thing that's rolling. So we just got to keep it on going. And the Yay Green team.
So if there's nothing else, I'll just close by saying that if we get each of you a little notice, can you put it on your local listservs the way that some of you have for some of the other recreation and other programs I've been involved in? Yep. Great.
Thanks very much. Okay. We will move to our next item, which is the next to the last item for the evening. And that's a discussion of our legislative action requests.
Good evening. Each year, the Maryland Municipal League puts forward its legislative priorities, and they ask municipalities to recommend up to 3 ideas for them to consider. The legislative committee reviews the proposals and makes recommendations, but final approval of the up to 3 priorities that they usually choose takes place through adoption at the MML's Fall Conference, which this year is in mid-October on Solomon's Island. I've attached to the agenda package kind of the standard form that MML uses to evaluate and get some information on the different proposals. I think that there's not a lot that is new that I have heard from. I've not received any comments from any of the council members on ideas. I did get some follow-up from Bruce on the municipal tax duplication recommendation. But based on the kind of conversations that we've had in the past, some of the conversations that we had with Michelle Douglas at the MML conference and the follow-up that I had with her, some of the topics that we might choose, of which we can only choose 3, are establishing a better formula and a long-lasting good formula for highway user revenue, taking some action related to municipal tax duplication as a follow-on to the task force's recommendation that Mayor was participating on. The city may wish to urge support of the to eliminate the exemption of banks and similar institutions from paying personal property tax. That's something we've put forward a number of years. And I know that Rockville is taking a position on ensuring that telecommunication fees continue to be paid to local governments and want some attention given to that. I'm open to other ideas, but it would be good for you to give recommendations of up to 3 items that I can go ahead and prepare for a resolution for next week.
Okay. I'll just start off by saying I like 3 of these ideas on here. I like the coming up with adequate formula for future highway user revenue. I tend to think that whatever might come out of the task force that the state is putting together now on this is going to need continued input. I doubt that it's going to get solved quickly. These task forces that are formed over the interim sometimes take a while to bring their recommendations to the point where things actually happen and become changes in law. So I think it would be good to have MML will be working on it, but I think it's good to make it a priority. I think the tax duplication issue is one that's been dear to our hearts for a long time, and we have pushed sometimes as a lonely voice. We're getting a lot more traction now with our county colleagues in the chapter. There's a lot more traction statewide, and there was fairly good turnout at the session that I convened on Sunday at the conference. A lot of discussion about how this potential change might happen, and I think a lot of municipalities are going to be coming back with their take on this issue, and it may be a question of somebody puts it in and a whole bunch of others go, us too, and so that the way that works is those all get kind of joined up with kind of a co-sponsorship of a legislative action request. And I like the idea of the telecommunications fees continuing to be paid to local governments because there's the real potential to lose those, and I think the only question is going to be, does that have statewide implication? And I'm not sure how many of the smaller municipalities might be getting that, but that argument sometimes just doesn't hold water because a lot of times MML takes priority positions on things that say affect planning and zoning or something like that, and only some of the municipalities in the state have planning and zoning authority. So the argument that, well, if it doesn't affect us all, we don't do it, just isn't consistent. And I don't know what order the lights came on, so I'll just run down the line. Councilmember Smith.
Thank you. I would have to agree with the mayor and say that I support focus going forward with the highway user revenue, municipal tax duplication, and the telecommunication fees paid to local governments. But I would like to know, have there been other municipalities that have inquired or wanted to take a legislative position on the personal property tax paid to banks and similar institutions?
Actually, I don't know about how many different municipalities have expressed interest. Seth, you may know better than I, but I think that there's been kind of sporadic interest by both counties and municipalities on the issue.
3 years ago, a number of municipal officials came and testified before the Ways and Means Committee, but then 2 years ago, it really didn't even attract that support. But it came up late the first time, and it just wasn't a real priority. And I will, since I'm talking, I'll just take another few seconds to say that I don't see that I would have personally the time to push this, and it just, well, I'll stop there. It's not my floor.
And I'll add that I don't remember which year, but I'm not exactly sure how to describe her position, but I think it's the president of the council in Frederick took an interest in this bill and testified.
Yeah, if I may. The person who had sponsored, the legislator who had sponsored this bill, sponsored it without any expectation that he would actually do any work to promote its passage, and I don't see any prospect that there would be a different sponsor the next go-around. And then in particular, one of the key members of the leadership in the House of Delegates is, I learned subsequently to the first time this was introduced, the person who brokered one of the people who brokered this tax break for financial institutions, and that person is still in place.
I just had one more question. Will large municipalities and small municipalities join together and come up with one legislative action request?
What happens, and obviously Bruce can speak to this as being chair of the legislative committee for some time, different municipalities submit the item to Maryland Municipal League staff. They compile it into they write it up in a more text-oriented way and present it, and they identify which municipalities have sponsored it. Often several different ones will be on the list because they come up with similar or the same proposal that helps get it passed, but it doesn't, it's kind of a hit or miss based on the issue, I think.
Yeah, I would say that recently there has been a fair amount of unanimity on what the issue should be, and it's been highway user revenues. Tax duplication and some other things have tended to garner some support with different municipalities submitting variations on an idea, and those tend to there's a process where it's like, okay, can we combine all of these and put them under one umbrella and say this is the issue that is the initiative, and other times they just don't fit that way and they're kept separate. And I would say that it helps to have a lot of people pushing the same one, but in the end, they're evaluated on the strength of the prospects and the ability for passage and the importance to the general membership.
Thank you.
Councilmember Schultz.
One of the things that came up at the MML conference during the large city forum was an extensive discussion about the state's ethics requirements. And there was a lot of participation, and it was interesting to hear various people's concerns. One of the ones that percolated to the surface was concern about the fact that this documentation that we all submit, there's very little protection under the FOIA. There's so much personal confidential information that we're required to put in, but then it's available to the public in a sense, in that a number of people were expressing concern about identity theft or just plain abuse of the privilege of FOIA to publish information that really has no need to be published. And we were concerned, the people talking about this were saying, well, this is, a lot of the large city people have more at stake than maybe the smaller cities, but in the middle of this conversation, where the person who was helping to run the small cities forum, which was concurrent, comes in and wants to know if this is an issue for us. And we're saying, well, is it an issue? And they said, oh, Lord, yeah, everybody in the small cities forum is concerned about this too, not just for the identity theft aspect, but the inappropriateness of the level of detail that's being asked of people, and that it can be a deterrent to candidates wanting to run for office or wanting to run for re-election, and so forth and so on. My point's not to go on to all of the arguments, but just to say that this is something that a lot of people were expressing a great deal of concern about. And if you're looking for a subject that runs across the state of Maryland from one county, one end to the other, this was one of those issues.
I would concur. I would say I was one of the few people in that room who, when asked, reported that there generally weren't concerns about the ethics law from this council. But if I had to predict, I'd say that's going to be one of the priorities. Councilmember Mayo.
Thank you. I think tax duplication seems like an obvious issue for us to focus on. But I wanted to back up a little bit. I guess I think about the question of, using our vote versus wasting our vote. It seems like no doubt that the highway user fees is going to be an issue that's going to be identified as a priority, given that it was the very top last year as an MML priority, and that it's an issue that needs to be resolved. So I just wonder if we need to be one more group saying, that's something that's on our list. On the ethics issue, I agree that the level of disclosure is probably too much, but I know we made a run at, or there was at least discussion of trying to change it last year. This didn't go anywhere. So I guess the question is, the feasibility. The two other issues that I wanted to bring up are that last year we talked about and were unable to do this, which was provide a rebate back to our citizens associated with taxes. And that was because the AG, state AG, has ruled that municipalities have the power to tax, but not to do the opposite, not to give money back. That seems to me a very clear limitation on our current authority, and something that, is just very clear. There's an AG's opinion that indicates that that's a limitation. And that's an issue that I would be interested in seeing us make it as a legislative priority. The second issue, and this just came up in discussion with PEPCO, is that in some states there is a program that allows essentially on-bill financing of energy-related changes. So if a homeowner were to, or a lower-income homeowner were to want to buy a refrigerator, they may not have the money to buy a new refrigerator. In some states, what you can do is PEPCO will pay for a refrigerator for you, and then on your bill, on your electricity bill, they pay you back. What PEPCO indicated was that they said, a resident brought this up, PEPCO said, we would love to have legislators take an interest in this issue. We would love to see the ability for on-bill financing to be something that was established in Maryland, because it takes apparently some sort of legislative change to establish that system of essentially lending money through your electricity bill. So that's another issue I would just bring up. And the one other comment I guess I'd love to make is that it'd be great to have more time to talk about these issues. I mean, we live in one of the most politically engaged, as many people know, parts of the state, full of lots of donors. But I don't think we adequately engage our residents in these same battles. We get, we work together with MML. Ideally, we tee up a couple of issues. But if we could find a way to spend a little more time so we can poll and recruit and get public testimony on legislative issues, we potentially could do that. We would have more power to the issues that we were at least teeing up if we could get more residents. So that, to me, and I probably wasn't paying enough attention to the rolling agenda, but only seeing this on the list on Friday night left me with not a lot of time to spend time, coming up with legislative issues. So, thank you.
And interesting that you mentioned about being able to put the energy efficient items on the utility bill. My grandparents got a Westinghouse Model A toaster, which is the kind where you flip it manually, and they got it on their electrical bill. And I think the cost for the toaster was $1, and they paid it off on the bill.
That was last year?
That was Westinghouse Model A. That was the first toaster. Councilmember Daniels Cohen.
Thank you, Mayor. This is, I know we had something that was big-time legislature that never made it because we introduced it too late. Heather Mazur was going to, and I don't know which thing it was.
That's the 410 related bill.
Okay.
And one of the things that I want to follow up on what Councilmember Mayle mentioned, the discussion tonight is to fill out the LAR forms and get them into MML.
Okay.
What it doesn't really do is talk about what the city's legislative priorities are as a city.
Okay.
And so there's many things that may be more appropriate, that we need to think about as a whole, that aren't just, something that helps most municipalities across the state of Maryland make more money, which tends to be what the MML priorities are for. And so some of the things that I think we should have a lot of discussion, and it usually takes place in early September, about what the legislative priorities are for the community and for the city, so that we have a whole list of things. MML starts really early on the LAR process. I think it's it always feels like you haven't even finished the legislature when the LAR requests come out.
The process starts in mid to late August.
Right, and so I think that is part of the problem. I did send out a message to the council in advance to say that this is coming up, but I do think that the bigger discussion about what the legislative priorities for the city are should be a much larger discussion and take more time.
Because I don't want that one to drop this year, and because last year she was just running for maybe run for the governor, and this year we've got a governor running things going on, and it may not even be the right time. We may have lost our slot, but I don't want to lose that as a city. And the other, the highway user revenue, this is a no-brainer. And municipal tax duplication, it's a no-brainer. Mm-hmm. Those are the kinds of things we need to focus on, and as en masse with Maryland Municipal League go after the telecommunication fees, and the third one is whatever comes up third, but the highway user revenues, give us back our money.
And the 410 bill, I think we can have a different way of going at it this term.
Okay.
Yeah, I think there needs to be a lot of discussion, and I did have some follow-up discussions with Michelle Douglas that I think we need to all get back and talk about. For the municipal tax duplication, I just wanted to mention that the proposal that is from the task force would apply statewide, which in the past, because there were the shall counties and the may counties and the whole different approaches with different counties specified out, made it very difficult, I think, to unite municipalities on the issue because they were all over the place. While I have, frankly, some concerns about the proposal from the task force as it affects Tacoma Park, I think it does have the advantage of being something that could be adopted or looked at closely by municipalities across the state, and thereby get a little bit more traction than the past discussions have held.
Councilmember Siemens.
Thank you, Mayor. I think from a process perspective, it would be helpful if the council did talk about what was our highest priorities and then decide which ones we want to push with MML. So we have that discussion first. But in general, I agree with the mayor's priorities on these. But I do strongly support Councilmember Mail's suggestion of the on-bill financing for energy-efficient appliances. I think that would be a very valuable thing for the community and also for community members.
Right, and just as a follow-up, the two items that Councilmember Mail mentioned, the rebate back to citizens, allowing it to have a tax rebate to citizens, and the on-bill financing would be things that aren't really municipal related, so they could be, state bills that we advocate for and push, but they're not likely to be kind of MML sponsored priorities, as far as I can tell.
Are we sure they don't only affect municipalities, but they, I think, are something that municipalities could get behind.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the tax rebate may very well be one.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah. The rebate is a municipal power, and whether there are some more Republican-aligned councils that might be interested in that, I don't know, but it does seem like something that could come up.
Yeah. Maybe what we can do on those two is, in the intervening time before next week, we can get a little bit of feedback from MML on how they would look at those and see whether it's worth, as you say, jumping off of one or two of the ones that will get a lot of support, which the kind of countervailing to that is ones that we've always been in the lead on, so people would kind of look oddly as, well, those aren't priorities for you. But it could well be worth saying, well, we know that everybody else is on board, so we're bringing these other ones forward just to get them on the table. And if they don't work as MML priorities, there are any number of bills that have started with one or two municipalities bringing it in as a priority, working it, getting the support of MML as something that other municipalities are interested in, and it gathers momentum that way. It may take a year or two or three, but it can start with one municipality. The advertising for the public hearings and moving that off of the newspapers to the electronic started with Gaithersburg and then kind of became an MML priority, but only after Gaithersburg went at it a year or two alone.
So the Wayne Gretzky quote, he skates where the puck is going, not where it's been, and so we can say on some of these things we've made our point, others are following, so let's go somewhere new.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to ask one follow-up question to either the deputy city manager or the mayor on the telecommunications fees piece. I guess I just hadn't heard or paid attention when someone had told me that there was a threat to that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a fairly significant challenge. Basically, the state wants the money, and the chair of the Ways and Means Committee has been looking for a way to do that for a long time, and we would really prefer that she not go there. There's a lot. There's national law that's related to some of that, but from a local standpoint, we certainly do rely on it. We'd like more flexibility in using it, but it would be really a shame to completely lose it and just have it go with state funds.
And an earlier version of it, the city went down as part of a large group to testify against an earlier version, and our city TV crew was there as well, and people came out in force, and with that showing, the bill just kind of disappeared.
But it's not gone away, actually. It keeps.
Well, it went
popping
away
up.
that time.
That time.
It keeps circling back.
From a logistics standpoint, we're a day a day short on this week in terms of a work week, so I would like to have some direction on how many LAR forms I prepare in advance of Monday night's resolution. I mean, obviously you can move things around, but what I would want to do is have that information prepared so that you choose the 3 or 4 and then go back down to 3 when it's time to vote.
Will we cause you a heart attack if we say 5?
No, I'd just like to know which 5.
Can I suggest that there were the 3 that I suggested and the 2 that Councilmember Mail added, and depending on the answers we get and the sense that we have next week, we can decide which 3.
Is that the direction?
Mayor Williams?
Yes.
since we still have some time on the clock tonight before
We do?
tomorrow,
Oh.
can I ask what happened, could you refresh my memory on the purchase of streetlights? That was something that had been a priority a couple of years ago. This municipal purchase of streetlights, Delegate Carr's proposal.
Right.
I'm having a hard time remembering.
It's,
Where
I mean,
that
it's
went.
still out there. It's still a significant issue.
Yeah.
Each year, Delegate Carr brings it up, and we have, you know, Daryl goes down, we make a strong presentation.
But that is a municipal issue.
It is.
I think it would help if you would elaborate for our city manager's benefit as to what we're talking about here.
One of the problems that we have is that when, if we want streetlights, if we want to take over the streetlights, we can put LED lights in them or whatever, we have to pay the price that Pepco quotes for them, which in no way reflects the actual cost of the streetlight, especially in its depreciated state that we get the poles in. Across the state, many communities want to have some control over what the fixtures are so we can save money because we pay the energy prices for them. And we have not had a successful discussion that would allow kind of a neutral third party to help set the price of those poles. That's the basic part.
I think it's a valuable cause
It is.
for the city, and at some point should be a priority. I don't know how that would balance out against the other 5 this year.
I happen to agree.
Okay, so I got 6 items?
Yep.
All right, thank you.
Okay, I think we're finished on that one. We have discussion of Safe Roadways Committee Residential Streetscape Task Force. Councilmember Grimes, you want to say anything on that one?
I think I'm responsible for both ends of this, which is, by which I mean to say that I pushed for the recreation of the Safe Roadways Committee, and then we got, I think it was maybe one applicant for it or something like that. In other words, it wasn't a committee that people wanted to join. And I've thought about reasons why that would be, and partly that's because maybe council members have been getting very active on particular safety issues, and then we have other efforts within the city that have taken care of them without having a committee behind them. And then also I've helped people largely from my ward, but not exclusively from Ward 1, who have been interested in creating streetscape standards that initially would have focused solely on the historic district, but then after some discussion that included council members and other community members would include other parts of the city. And we had I thought, an extremely well done presentation from a group of people who organized themselves effectively several weeks ago. So the other part that I'm responsible for, aside from pushing for the recreation of safe roadways, was the suggestion. I think it was my suggestion that the safe roadways be repurposed. I'm not sure about that, but in any case, after reflection about that possibility of repurposing safe roadways to encompass, in addition to safety, the streetscape standards, and talking to some of the people who are involved in pushing for streetscape standards, and I think it is not a good idea that there are divergent purposes there. Safety and the streetscape standards. The streetscape standards have to be cognizant of safety needs and so on, but that's not the primary purpose. And I think that, but more to the point, I think that the establishment of streetscape standards, which is an ad hoc thing that could be done by a task force with very limited lifespan. And we have one almost ready-made. It's in the form of the people who self-organized and presented to us. Now, I'm sure that there isn't universal agreement on the points that they presented, but I hope that there's universal agreement that they made an excellent effort to tried to bring together points that they saw as important, that they think that the rest of the community would see as important, and to present a rationale for them. So my thinking now is that we would be best off appointing an ad hoc task force to look at the streetscape issues. I would invite the people who presented to us to become members of that and open it up for additional community membership, give them a very specific purpose, and task them in particular to work closely with the Public Works Department, which has to implement any kind of recommendations that they come up with, and then also work in conjunction with the police, of course, because the safety aspects do exist when talking about streetscape elements. So that's what I would propose, that safe roadways, I'm not sure what to do about, but that we appoint an ad hoc task force to look at streetscape issues that would include the people, if they wish to join it, who presented to us, as well as other residents, give them a specific task, mandate that they work with Public Works, and come up with recommendations for us to consider.
Comments, Councilmember Mayo.
I can support that suggestion. I guess one minor amendment, which is that I would encourage any such task force to look at potential elements that potential recommendations for the historic district and sort of separately consider the rest of the city. So it could be that they come back with recommendations saying do this citywide, but I would be equally interested if the recommendations were somewhat different. And that's partly because the infrastructure already in place is somewhat different, at least in parts of the city.
Yeah.
The other comment I wanted to make is that, and this is a broader comment, but I think we should encourage our committees to not always feel like that the way that they have to operate is to have one meeting every month on a weekday night. So, for example, if we had task forces or even standing committees that chose to meet for 3 4-hour periods on, 3 Sundays in a month and be done, I'd be perfectly happy with that if it increased participation, it allowed for a more focused task, if it meant we had to give them a narrower mandate, and I think this is potentially one that would fit that, so that they could get something done in that task. I think that would be a valuable thing, is just essentially be open-minded with committees that they don't have to work the same way that everybody worked in the past. Because I just know that the level of participation that a Monday night every month for the Environment Committee, for example, creates is a pretty big burden. But if you compress the time, you compress the mandate, you can potentially attract new people who are willing to take something on in that sort of time span. So I know that's a little bit of a tangent from this specific issue, but I know we have an issue with participation. And it's not that residents in the city don't care about safe roadways, bicycles, cars. I mean, look at the comments we've had on the junction, for example. But that maybe the way that we're allowing them to participate is too narrow, and that's what's not getting us membership. So it's just an idea.
Councilmember Schultz.
One thing that I would like to see this committee, however it gets formulated, is to come up with some uniformity with regard to the design of speed humps in the city, because it seems like there's an infinite variety of them, and some of them they're just physically different. Some require coming to a virtual stop to get over, and others are so benign that you wonder why they even bother to call them speed humps, or whatever they are. And it seems like it would make it a lot saner if, for example, there were 2 styles, and the community saying that they want to have a speed bump, but this is the type we want. We want type A or type B, and because I hear complaints from people who go over them that it's jarring to their physical bodies. Some of them are so hard to get over. If you have a low-slung camper van that I do, like I have, you actually hit bottom on some of them, which can cause a lot of damage, expensive replacement damage for undercarriage materials. I think that's something that needs to be addressed, because I don't think there's an alleged standard, but I don't see evidence of it in the city. I just see variations on a theme. I concur with the idea that Councilmember Mayle mentioned about if you're going to have streetscape standards, is that one of the variables that needs to be taken into account is cost of installation, because I know that like in my community, people probably have very little concern about the quality of sidewalk materials or the color. They would just want to have sidewalks, and if the sidewalks can be built in a more efficient, less costly manner, that means more sidewalks for people that want them. Whereas in a built-up neighborhood with historical characteristics like we have in parts of our city, the values of how residents look at these things is the opposite. It's not to say we should do it one way, one way of doing it is better than another, but that just to respect the fact that in different parts of the city, which I think you were alluding to, residents have stronger preferences in how they look at this sort of thing. And while that creates a problem of sort of saying, well, either you have standards or you don't have standards, I think we can have standards and also have some flexibility so that the city can conserve its financial resources as much as reasonable. Those are just a couple thoughts.
And I'll just say real quickly, I agree with Councilmember Grimes' assessment. I agree with Councilmember Mayle's additional points, and to Councilmember Schultz's request about standard for speed humps. My understanding is that we have basically two types of speed humps. We have speed tables and speed humps, and within speed humps we have the exception to the rule, which is Maple Avenue, and then the rule is that there's a template that they refer to as a hump on a bump, or a bump on a hump. And there's literally a plywood template that they could bring in here and show to us that's like an 8-foot piece of plywood that is what they're supposed to be built to. I'm not sure that they all get exactly to that template, but there is a template.
Would no doubt that there is that piece of wood out there, but I would bet you dollars, real dollars.
To donuts?
Well, I won't go that far. But no, I just don't think that template's used. I think that they get. They just well.
I would just beg you to please not bring that template in here again.
Councilmember Grimes.
My observation is that actually lack of standards coupled with our willingness to make exceptions costs the city money. On the speed humps in particular, I remember it's probably about 8 years ago at this point when Maple Avenue speed bumps were replaced, and the promise had been made that they would be replaced with the ones that existed beforehand, and then the city didn't live up to them, and then the residents forced the city to redo it, and I think the cost was $8,000. We grandfathered or grandmothered in the old speed humps, and maybe we shouldn't have done that. And having standards gives us a reference document that says that makes things clear to everyone, makes things clear to Public Works, makes things clear to the council, makes things clear to the residents what they can and should expect. I know that I've gotten requests, and I believe other council members have as well, for yellow curb painting. Sometimes that's around driveways, even if there's no parking. Sometimes it's around corners and so on. It's very irregularly done. If we could reduce the use of that yellow curve painting, I've drunk the Kool-Aid on this from my neighbor John Lawrence, we could save money and reduce confusion about where people are allowed to park and where they're not allowed to park, and improve the aesthetics of things. So I do actually believe that there are financial gains to be had in having rational policies in place, because the design guidelines will be policies, and it'll reduce the burden on everyone.
And I'll volunteer something that I've always felt that I had a ready answer to a question that somebody might ask me. I don't think anybody's asked me because I don't remember giving the answer, The question would have been, if there was something that a vote that you've taken on the city council that you could have a do-over, what would it be? And that item would be my vote to allow the continuation of the exception for the Maple Avenue speed humps. I would undo that vote.
Well, at least we did sometimes even if you're going to make exceptions, then you have standard processes for making exceptions. And when Washington Gas did a lot of work in the Philadelphia Eastern Avenue, it entailed repaving the streets, and that meant replacing the speed humps. We learned from past experience, past mistakes, and had Public Works participated in community meetings beforehand in order to make sure that there was consensus on what would be done, including replacing one irregular crosswalk, which wasn't ADA compliant, with another one that included a mild speed table. So when we make exceptions, maybe the process involved in those decisions could also be captured in the standards and save us all a lot of grief.
Yeah, and the exception in that case was based on a promise about when Maple Avenue got ride-on buses.
Well, I wish you hadn't mentioned ride-on.
Okay, I'll retract that. Councilmember Mail.
Sorry, I'll follow up again. And I support the idea of standards. I think I've heard everybody describe that. But it's just that there may be different standards that would apply in different parts of the community or in different situations. So just like for sidewalks, when we're replacing a current sidewalk with an ADA sidewalk, we're not making them 5 feet wide. But if we're putting in a new sidewalk, we're often making them 5 feet wide. We have different standards for different situations, and I think that's all. That if we're going to have a task force working on this, that you just keep an open mind that might be what they look at, and maybe they'll come back and say, nope, one standard makes sense. So be it. Thank you.
So if we have agreement that we want to have that task force look at those standards, that they can come back with recommendations for different standards in different parts of the city based on some criteria, that would be helpful. And we'll continue to recruit for the Safe Roadways Committee. Is there agreement on all that? Okay. Then I think we're finished, except the clerk is trying to keep us here.
So what do you see as the next step?
We're going to form the task force on those standards and ask for volunteers for that. We know we already have a core group.
Okay. So how should I be advertising for this, or are you not at that point yet?
I think we are. Yes.
May I, it's possible that the Public Works Director would appreciate direction on what Public Works is to do on things that we have discussed in the past, like the yellow curb painting. Maybe she would appreciate direction for what to do in the interim.
We did that.
Did we have sufficient direction to her?
We had direction for her commencing April 1 with the new expenditures that we
Okay,
did a
well,
couple weeks ago.
if I hadn't remembered it as being as definitive as maybe it was then. So
I
in that
took
case,
notes
it's my
from the
memory.
meeting and followed up with her.
Okay,
to say what was
good.
the
I didn't
interim
remember it
steps.
as being that definitive, but I'm glad to hear it.
I took it as definitive, so.
Okay. We're adjourned.
Love it, love it, love it.
Jesse, how are we doing with the voting task force?
today. I pray they'll take care of him, 'cause I